Hey everybody, this season I undertook something that I didn't think I could achieve. I didn't think I could do 5 headlines for every single match, plus friendlies, as well as all the podcasts twice a week and all the history content and specialty content that I make sure comes out on this channel. But here we are at the end of the season, and somehow, some way, I checked the playlist, I got through every single match review with 5 headlines for each of them. If you've been with me all season and watched every one, consider yourself a Barcelona podcast all-star. And for everybody else, I put them in a nice little playlist. As we head into the summer months, I'm going to reevaluate the content plan and figure out what's best for next season, what's best for me, what's best for you, and what's best for this channel. Most importantly for this channel though, if you want content the way it was this season, I do implore you to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, but more importantly, even share the channel. Let people know I exist. Let those big Barca accounts you want affiliate with me, let them know that you want them to talk to me as much as you want me to talk to them. You've also noticed that if you've been with me for a few years, and I did look back to some of the early videos on the channel, I'm getting older. And so having these videos not sponsored and having this channel not have consistent sponsors is making it harder to do. As you know, I'm always honest with you. So of course, more visibility, more numbers, more subscribers that I can take to advertisers to try to help me keep this channel going. That stuff is always appreciated. So all I'm asking you to do, again, share it. But if you're not subscribed, subscribe now. That is all I ask you. It's free, it's nice, it's easy, and allows me to head into the summer months with the most potential to be able to lock down some long-term future for the channel. If you clicked on this video and checked the runtime, you can imagine I'm not just going to be blabbering on about subscribing to the channel or helping the channel continue to grow and all that stuff for this entire duration. No, instead, I want to help you do what I had trouble doing, and that's remember what happened in the last 10 months of the season. So a good way to say goodbye to the Liga champions and the Spanish Super Cup winners, instead of remembering all the negative stuff, I thought I would pick the top 10, in my opinion, matches of this season, put them all together in chronological order so you could kind of get a positive view, so you could turn this on in the background and almost get a positive little documentary view of what was the best moments of this season. The timestamps below can help you jump from game to game in case you really remember one or don't remember one at all or don't want to remember one of these top 10 and you may disagree. Let me know in the comments below, of course. But I do hope you enjoy these top 10 matches of the 2022-23 season. Points against Real Sociedad are never a given. In fact, they're actually quite difficult to get. And even in a 4-1 victory, it wasn't all great from FC Barcelona today. In fact, much like Rayo Vallecano last week, if FC Barcelona don't put the ball in the back of the net and get the scoreline they do, and if Real Sociedad stays onside, then we're talking about an entirely different game. Not to be too boring, but the truth of the match is always somewhere in the middle, isn't it? 4-1 is a great result and with a lot of promising signs. There are also a lot of worrying things that could hamper Barcelona throughout the season. As always, even though you can hear I am a bit under the weather today and a bit crankier than normal, you know that I never really get too extreme, too good, or too bad with any result. So without further ado, here we go. Here are the 5 headlines for Barcelona's 4-1 victory over Real Sociedad. Headline 1 is Flip the Switch. I had already begun, and I was pretty deep in writing my 5 headlines, a lot of negative stuff in that first draft, but then all of a sudden Xavi put in the subs, and their talent and quality shone through. With the talent up top at his disposal, Xavi proved that, yeah, you can play all those talented, I know world class is a word that's thrown around too much, but not going to use world class, but I'll say very, very talented players up top, and Xavi proved that you can play them all together, switching to a 3-4-3. And those subs came on and joined Robert Lewandowski, who'd been tirelessly fighting through that match and proving in a few short moments that he is a switch to be flipped all by himself. He had 2 goals and an assist in a game where Barcelona were rather blah for 50 minutes or so, but he finished his chances like we knew he would. This is why Barca got him for this season. Champions League be darned, but there are quite a few times in this long year in the Liga where Barca don't bring their best, and Lewandowski will still help them walk away with 3 points. But the big switch obviously was when the subs came in. We'll have more on Ansu in a minute, but for Xavi to be able to and have the option to flummox La Real by inserting 2 very, very good forwards, putting Rafinha on the right isolated and Dembele on the left outside of Ansu, who was setting up as an interior on the left opposite Gavi, is obviously why Xavi asked for the wingers that he did. And before Real Sociedad could adjust and figure out that Barcelona were playing with 1,000 attackers, Barca put them on the back foot and put the ball in the net. Which even at that point in the match, it felt like Barcelona had blown this game open because Real Sociedad were on the back foot and not ready. And before Real Sociedad could adjust and figure out that Barcelona were playing with 1,000 attackers, meaning there was some space in behind, it was too late. Barcelona were pressing, they were on the front foot, they put the ball in the back of the net, and a really nice finish by Dembele as well on that second goal that even at that juncture in the game felt like they were blowing things open, and obviously they did in short order. And coupled with that is headline 2, Ansu is equal to difference maker.
Yes, in the second straight game, coming on as sub, changing things up, and you count the Gamper Trophy as well, Ansu has an ability to flip a match on its head. Of course, we know that he's a very, very talented young player. We know that he's had his injuries, and we wonder what we're going to get out of him this season. But if this is what you're going to continue to get, I'll continue to say it. He, Pedri, Araujo, their ceiling is how far this team can probably go. Because we can't anticipate about how much all these other established professionals will give us. But those three being at their ages, and Araujo I think is becoming more and more of a question mark. We'll get to that in a second. But Pedri and Ansu, and more on Pedri in a second as well, but Ansu in particular on the offense, on the attack, what he can give this team, coupled with Dembele and Rafinha and Lewandowski, that is Barcelona's ceiling. He did get a little bit of luck on Lewandowski's touch to set him up for the fourth goal, but I won't take anything away from the staggering display from him in those 30 minutes. I don't even know how much he knew about the assist on the third goal either, right into Lewandowski's path, but the fact of the matter is that Ansu puts himself where he needs to make an impact. He creates his own luck. He attracted attention and had a sublime back heel assist to Dembele, and the back heel was sweet, but Dembele's shooting lane remained open because the entire Real Sociedad defense collapsed on Ansu after he faked the shot. There will continue to be a temptation to ask why Xavi doesn't start Ansu, but with the rotation of Ansu, Dembele, and Rafinha, it feels like with that kind of talent, Xavi is only going to be getting it right. Unlike other areas of the field, there are no complaints from me with that rotation at this point in the season, and as I said, Xavi is going to have a hard time getting that wrong until we do see some of the cracks. But at this point, hard to get it wrong. But speaking of wrong, headline 3 is wrong to start. Not very often in Xavi's tenure have I said, from minute 1, Xavi did not get this right. And the irony is that Barca scored in the first minute. So it seemed like Xavi had got it right. But let me, readjust that headline and say, by minute 2, Xavi had started to get it wrong, and you understand the issues with what he put out to begin that match. Not even the 11, but the tactics that he gave and the instructions he gave to that 11. Because it is a 4-1 victory, I'm kind of using this whole third headline to go over all the negative stuff from the first 60 minutes of the match and how Xavi did get it so wrong. Because once Real Sociedad answered for Barcelona, it certainly looked like Barca had their issues. Even after Lewandowski's opener, you could tell that Real Sociedad were ready to take advantage of some of the problems that Barcelona had and the holes that Frenkie de Jong was leaving. On the La Real goal, there was an argument that 90% of that goal was on Frenkie de Jong. He lost the ball in the face of Basque pressure, and then he complained to the official instead of trying to get back. Would he have saved the Isak ball off the line? Probably not, but we'll never know because he never reacted. I don't want to do the whole de Jong thing now, but it seems that the club were preparing some of their squad as if they were going to convince him to leave, which is a ton of hubris from FC Barcelona. But due to his salary, that just ain't going to happen. And now he's too good to not get time. And with Busquets out, it was either de Jong or Pjanic, and Xavi opted for the Dutch midfielder as the pivot, a position which still doesn't work for him. Also on the Isak goal, which was a good finish, I don't want to take anything away from the Swedish striker. Certainly not. But Eric Garcia again struggled with a big and, good striker. He did well offensively, like usual, working really well in particular with Pedri, and he and Christensen were very organized on the offside trap despite only playing some preseason minutes together, leading Real Sociedad offside on 4 different occasions. But Eric Garcia, 1v1 with Isak, not really it on the night. There were a bunch of different times when you were kind of worried about him in isolation, and that pulled Christensen over, which pulled Araujo over, which put the alarm bells on Barcelona's right wing. All right, so 2 more pieces of bad news, and staying on that right wing, the right back situation was still a problem. Because of the pull that Real Sociedad attack had going to the right and pulling those 3 center backs, we have to say, counting the right back and Araujo, to their left, that meant that right flank for Barca was wide open. And for all the talk of Alonso, if Des is out and him being out of the squad again means that he's definitely out, Araujo at right back isn't working when Barcelona are in a game where they have the ball either, which is going to be most games. Araujo was tucked so far inside, as I just explained, and even when he was trying to cover that space, he wasn't really utilizing the ball to free up that lane. Real Sociedad didn't really have to pressure him in any way, and they were able to keep, even when Barcelona had the ball, they were able to strong side and keep the numerical advantage waiting for that switch that they were going to get off. And then when Dembele did come back to defend, that meant that Dembele, when he received the ball, was starting way too deep, and in the first half was unable to make an impact. And what made matters worse was that Ferran Torres playing off of Lewandowski was an utter failure today. I think the truth of Torres will be somewhere in the middle of me defending him and those saying he's not the right material. He was finally coming back into the team after missing the preseason, and while he did look rusty, his positioning was as much the problem as it was his touch or just, again, getting off the rust of not playing in the preseason. He wasn't combining well with Lewandowski, and he wasn't being a threat out wide. It was night and day when Ansu came on because, the formation changed, but when Ansu was inside, he would start some moves from out wide and come inside, and La Real had to make decisions and hand him off. For Torres, Zubeldia, Lenormand, and Zubamendi quite easily marked Torres out of the game. And when he did get on the ball, it just didn't work. As I always say with him, I'm going to continue to be patient. He's young, he's just coming back, and that at this moment, it's not an excuse for the player and what he's going to be for Barcelona. But at this juncture, it's still an excuse for him this season. So I'm going to be patient with him. And I'm actually going to put some of that on Xavi for putting together an 11 that I don't know what he was seeing in training, but that 11 wasn't working from the very, very start of this match. And yeah, of course it goes on Ferran Torres for not being the player that he needs to be and not doing, I would assume, what Xavi asked him to do, but also on Xavi for putting together an 11 that just didn't have it from minute number 2 after that goal was scored. 4 is why not Balde. Clearly after this match, he does give you something. I don't know how much he knew about the assist. Was it a pass? Was it technically supposed to be a scuff shot? But either way, Balde was able to do enough to make an impact on this game and to show himself as being a fine player for 5 minutes, just as he was in the preseason. And I am a little vindicated because it feels like as his teammates improved, as I said many times about Balde, I felt like as his teammates improved, as their technical abilities improved, his physical tools would be more useful to players like a Pedri. I mean, Gavi he actually never even played with at all, even though they're practically the same age. They've never really overlapped in those teams. I'm also not arguing for him because I've watched him at the younger levels. In fact, that was the very reason why I was concerned that he wasn't going to be ready for any first-team opportunities this year. But he has earned those in the limited minutes that Xavi has given him. And after seeing him in an actual match where the minutes do matter, it does make me question the whole Alonso situation after we just spoke about right back. You know, I don't think I'm going to try to galaxy brain it. If it's smacking us in the face that Dest isn't the answer, the club wants him out, Roberto at right back, I don't think Xavi's totally sold on that either. It's why he came in off the bench as a sub, as a defensive midfielder. Then Barcelona are going to need a right back, desperately. And I don't think they have the ability, looking at the fact that they cannot register Koundé. It was one thing to get that money, get that revenue in, and be able to sign Lewandowski and Rafinha, and to dot your I's and cross your T's financially. But clearly, they didn't finish the job. De Jong didn't leave. They can't register Koundé just yet until Aubameyang or Memphis is sold. That means I don't think that they should try to have to fight to register Alonso as well if they only have 2 more spots available for Koundé and potentially a right back. I know Koundé can potentially play right back. Will that change for Araujo? Maybe Xavi has some answers that we don't know about yet, but I think Balde can be the backup. The final argument for Balde is that especially if Xavi is going to use that 3-4-3 that he had in his back pocket, there will be stretches of games where Barca won't be using a left back, as they did for a portion of the game tonight. But I think the counter argument that Xavi and the club would have is the answer to why Balde may not be it. I think it says more about Alba more than Balde, unfortunately. If Alba is falling off a cliff and Xavi is seeing that in training, he may want Alonso because it's going to be more of a split job than a backup job, which makes sense based solely on Alba's 2 games to start this season and the preseason, which is starting to be a pretty big sample size. And headline 5 is Pedri and Ter Stegen kept Barca in it. Ter Stegen, people are going to say, I think I've actually seen a lot of it already, people aren't talking about Ter Stegen. Well, I'm talking about Ter Stegen here because he's put together back-to-back performances that kept Barcelona in matches, and I think is a big reason why Barca started this season with 4 points. Because as emotional as one goal can be, you know, I try to say that, okay, you know, I always look at the tactics and think it's coming down to who got it right, who got it wrong from the sideline. But sometimes it is about the players on the field putting the ball in the net or not. And a goalkeeper is a last opportunity for the other team to put the ball in the net. And Ter Stegen, in the first half in particular, came up huge with those 2 saves. The one on David Silva was a very, very good save. Maybe the best save that he has made in multiple seasons. There was one where I know he was coming to his left and he was able to stop one with his wrist. I don't remember, it was a Champions League match, I think, that didn't really matter as much. I want to say Dinamo Kiev from a few seasons ago. That was a tremendous save. But this one against David Silva is one that should immediately go on his highlight reel and the one that saved Barcelona in this match. And Pedri, he was asked to do everything over the course of those 90 minutes. In the 4-3-3 to start, he had to be the connector. He had to be the one to play in Torres or Lewandowski. He was asked to switch play. He was asked to defend at times next to De Jong in a double pivot. His ball retention abilities led to that first goal, and I'm going to sound like a broken record talking about Pedri this season. I know that. I'm warning you. There's going to be a lot of praise about Pedri this year, but I, in good faith, couldn't come out with this match review without praising and giving a compliment to Barcelona's number 8, because he is, as I continue to say, Barcelona's most influential and important player over the course of 90-minute games, just because of how many jobs he can do. All right, so now the match review is complete. Not the best performance, but 4-1 is a really good result, and it feels like Barcelona are at least back on track. And they're still without Jules Koundé, who arguably might be their best defender, and a player that could continue to take Barcelona to a higher stratosphere. Expect the podcast on Tuesday night. We'll continue to break down this match with a little more detail. And I hope we're talking about registering Koundé. Are we talking about selling Memphis, Aubameyang, or Des? Who knows? All I know is a 4-1 is a good result in the second game of the season for Barcelona. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca. I'm back from my travels, and Barcelona are back as well. Now, that's a little bit in jest, a little bit of hyperbole, but it was good to see two back-to-back responses after what was a hell week of Inter and Real Madrid. This time, it was former Barca manager Ernesto Valverde that walked into that Barca buzzsaw at home. But instead of talking about the last Barca manager to win a Liga trophy, hopefully we have some nice things to say about who I hope is the next Barcelona manager to win a trophy, that being Xavi. So let's get to it. Here are the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 4-0 win over Atletico. One is maybe his best. I'm talking about Ousmane Dembélé here, the player that every time everybody sells their stock on him, it's time to buy it right back because he has a game like this. Because he is that player that is capable of anything at any moment, whatever he adds to a game, as we always say, under Xavi, Ousmane Dembélé is maybe his primary most important player because when he's on his game, Barcelona are an unstoppable force. When he's off it, not much happens for Barca, and there's a lot of crosses. Of course, the numbers don't lie here. 1 goal and 3 assists. When he's producing like that, they are unbeatable when Dembélé is providing finishing product. But it's also the smaller stats that were really impressive today from Dembélé. He was really controlled on his dribble attempts, 2 of 3 on the day, which again is pretty small of a number, 4 key passes. He was also 4 for 4 on his long balls on the evening, as well as winning almost half of his duels. He lost the ball 16 times today, but as you remember, the number that you really want to keep it under if you're Dembélé, who's consistently being asked to take on and take on and take on responsibility on the wings, is around 20 to 25. When Dembélé does less than that, it means he's largely either been ineffective or very efficient, and today it was the latter of the two. The reason I say maybe his best is I'm not sure if there was a game where he did even better. Those who follow Dembélé and really only think about Dembélé, you can leave that game in the comments below, but this one certainly has an argument because of that finishing product. The first goal of the game that was scored is scored in an uncharacteristic way, at least for Dembélé. First, there was the shot, which we do expect. Lewandowski stayed onside, and then the cross, a perfect header from Dembélé. Barcelona weren't crossing to any extreme extent today, but when Dembélé puts his head on the end of it, that tells you it's going to be a good day at the Camp Nou. The second goal, you can kind of get on Atletico a little bit, the Roberto goal. Dembélé started it wide, and it was just a 2v2 counterattack with Sergio Roberto, Barca making it look easy. The 3-0 came, Gavi's run in behind the defense wing we've been asking for, and that run off of Dembélé gave him, that being the Frenchman, the space to cut inside. He finds Lewandowski, who turns wonderfully and hits it knowing exactly where the net is. Little aside here, I know we're talking about Dembélé. Lewandowski continues to be the goal scorer in the Liga that Barcelona need to win the domestic competition. The only problem that's going to come with a performance like this for Dembélé is I think fans are going to expect this game after game after game. You have to understand that now I know people want to throw out some of those sites like the Who Scores and the Sofa Score and things like that, and that's totally fair. Use those stats to make sure that the eye test that you saw and what you believe happened in the game, I guess that is confirmation bias, but sometimes stats do back up what we were seeing, just like I use the numbers right there. But those overall scores they give, right, a 10 of 10 or a 3 of 10 or a 5 of 10, those aren't really indicative of how a player is playing. But I will say that on a number of those sites, Dembélé was 10 of 10 in this game. And this time, I won't argue with those sites. Certainly Dembélé, 10 of 10, one of the best matches we have seen for him. If he continues to do 85% of that in 85% of matches for Barcelona, this team, that being Barcelona, is going to be in a good place to make up those points on Real Madrid and potentially still win the Liga. 2 is definitely his best. Coming into this game, one of the big matchups that I was excited to see was Alejandro Balde, Barcelona's starting left back, and I think Xavi's also got that idea and would agree with you, against Nico Williams, the 20-year-old for Atletico, who has been one of the most exciting wingers that the Spanish division has to offer. Not only did Alejandro Balde win the long game, being the full 90 minutes against Nico Williams, but there were 3 select moments from this matchup where Balde, I don't know what that says about Nico Williams, but he was the least effective player on the pitch for Atletico, while Balde was as strong as possible. Sure, his finishing product and his final ball isn't what people want at this moment, but he does everything else at such a high level. That's why he's a starter for Barcelona. Again, Alba, better at crossing the ball in, which can be really important when Barcelona are in a jam and do need some kind of miracle, where they need that ball in the box because the team is putting all 10 guys in there, or you have a team that's really, really good at counterattacking, and you have to leave bodies behind that second wall, so you just have to kind of cross for your life. That unfortunately does happen in Barcelona at times. But for Balde, his dribbling, his man-to-man defense, his ability to dribble himself out of problems. I'm not even talking about dribbling forward on the wings, but dribbling himself out of problems like he did in the 38th minute, splitting a double team with a nice pass, a wall pass, and then using his speed to get around to help with the counter-attack. He did it early in that game to Nico Williams to shut him down completely, and then late in that game, he did the exact same thing. Shut him down, the help came to try to take the ball back, and he got himself out of trouble. Having Frankie de Jong helping him defensively, as Dylan was playing as, we'll get into the formation in a second, but having de Jong so close allowed Balde to have somebody to play off of that wasn't just playing back to the goalkeeper or to Eric Garcia in that first half, and that was really helpful for Balde too. Just like Dembele, I hope to see 85% of this from Balde for most of the rest of the season. But if you didn't know it already that he's the starting left back for Barcelona, this is the game that I think is going to be or should be the nail in the coffin for Alba and Alonso and any other doubters out there just yet. I was slow to him and I wanted to be patient with Balde, but as I've said many times, I mean, it was easy to pat yourself on the back on such a prodigious talent, but he has been good or one of the best players in the academy for a long time now. I know he's only 18 years old, but it's been a few years now that you've kind of been waiting to see if this could reach his potential, and he is well on his way. Somehow, he went in the last 2 years from falling behind that track to being not only on the right track to be a starter and be a good player for Barcelona, but he is currently the starting left back for Barca. 3 is all the midfielders. Now to talk a bit about Frankie de Jong and friends, that being Sergio Busquets, Pedri, and Gavi. This was kind of a 3-4-3 in the build-up as we expect, with that 4 formation in the midfield, sometimes being a diamond, but it also looked like a 4-3-3 with Pedri playing as that left winger, that almost Iniesta-esque left wing position. You remember that one where he would invert, but kind of just sit in the middle of the field, which pushed, especially when Barcelona were pressing, which they did in this game, would push Lewandowski, whoever was at number 9, it was David Villa a lot of the time, out to the wing to defend on the wing. And Lewandowski did that to good effect today, and that meant that Pedri didn't really have to take on this huge role in the game, which the big picture here is, yes, Gavi getting injured is rough just a few days before Bayern Munich. That's not what you want to see at all. But that has nothing to do with the lineup that Xavi chose. He obviously didn't choose a lineup because he was willing to put any of his midfielders at risk. You don't play in case of risk. But with Busquets and De Jong and Pedri and Gavi all on the field at the same time to begin the match, and then Kessié even playing almost 70 minutes coming on the 33rd for Gavi, you do wonder what midfielders are going to be fresh and healthy against Bayern Munich on Wednesday. And there was a huge risk to this because there was a world where Barcelona has to fight like they do against Athletic Club so often. They have to suffer and they get beat up quite a bit against Athletic Club, and then they're limping into Wednesday. But as I said, with the exception of the fluke injury to Gavi, Pedri was able to kind of take it down to second gear. He even came off the field, which is great for Pedri. Frankie de Jong, the same thing. You felt like he could have influenced the game even more if he needed to, but he didn't need to on the day because, again, of how special Dembele was. That's helpful, and the fact that Barcelona were putting the ball into the Athletic Club net. It's very helpful to allow players to kind of get into second gear. Busi wasn't really great in this game, but I don't think that affects what we're going to see against Bayern Munich, unless that Gavi injury is a real worry. We've heard that it isn't, but if it's not Pedri and Gavi and De Jong against Bayern Munich, which is what it should be on paper, then we likely will see De Jong playing as an interior and Pedri and Busi, because those are the 3 best midfielders in Xavi's eyes at this moment. We even saw Pablo Torre in this game. There was a moment late on when it was Bellerin and Rafinha and Pablo Torre warming up, and the worry, of course, was going to be Pablo Torre. He may not even get minutes here, and if he's not going to get minutes when his team is up 4-0, well, then that's a concern for the player moving forward. But unfortunately, that late injury to Sergio Roberto, with Pablo Torre being the 5th sub, meant that Barcelona up 4-0 were really just defending in those final 10-plus minutes that Pablo Torre was on the field. So as this left winger / midfielder, he was kind of just defending for his life, didn't really have too much to do. But that does back up what Xavi has said, that he wants to get him on the field, wants to get him a little bit of action, and that he is earning it in training. And there was something, I don't know if you missed this, but Xavi did say he picked up a knock in training right before that game against Villarreal, and he would have got a run out in that game too. So Xavi being transparent that he does want to give Pablo Torre minutes is indicative that Xavi is meaning to play him. And unfortunately for Barca Athletic, who were utterly smashed today, Chadi Riyad might be staying down there for a bit. Not a good day at the office for him under Rafa Marquez. And if Xavi doesn't feel like Barca Athletic need Pablo Torre, which it seemed like today they did, then that means that he does want to use him in the first team. 4 is overlapping runs. I do want to reiterate this quite a bit
Because against Inter, who were playing 5 at the back, which is a lot different than the shambolic defensive effort that Athletic Club put in, which again is really interesting because Villarreal and Athletic Club were 2 of the top 5 defenses in the Liga heading into these matchups, and then Barcelona absolutely smashed both of them. 4 at the back just was not good enough for either of those teams. And as I said in that little match review against Villarreal, there is this argument that Inter were playing 5 at the back, that Real Madrid, of course, are elite at playing at the counterattack, and their defenders are just all out better than what Athletic Club can put on the field. But Barcelona were much better today at overlapping runs and creating space for Dembélé to cut in field. Yeah, the second goal, as I had already mentioned, was rough for Athletic Club, allowing Sergio Roberto to kind of waltz right in. They had one eye on Dembélé, but even if they brought that second man a bit late, and Roberto was just wide open, it was a good finish. It seems like all his finishes are with contact coming, sliding in, and again, sad to see Sergio Roberto go down with that late shoulder injury if he's out for any bit of time. What is a shame is that of those 4 captains in Alba, Piqué, Bussi, and Roberto has been the most serviceable and has been the most useful this season. So I don't know what that says about the other captains or if that's just a compliment for Sergio Roberto. So I think I'm going to be positive after this result and say it's a compliment to Roberto. But either way, Athletic Club poor defending, Roberto and Dembélé making the most of it. And it's because Roberto was working hard to get around Dembélé. And we saw Gabi making really positive, penetrative runs in behind that backline for Athletic Club, even if he didn't receive it. He was working tirelessly to make those runs in the first 33 minutes before he came out of the game. But by that time, Athletic Club were already kind of broken down. Kessié, this is where I worry a little bit because while he was doing the same things, it seems like his chemistry with his teammates isn't what it needs to be, and I think that's maybe the primary reason why Xavi isn't using him, because he's doing all the other little things right. He's driving with the ball, he's getting forward, he knows where the pass needs to be, but it's just not happening quick enough, and it does to me seem like a chemistry issue, a timing issue, and you hope that, as I've kind of defended so many of these new recruits, it does take a little bit of time to get comfortable with how quickly the ball moves at FC Barcelona. And then, while it wasn't necessarily an overlapping run, it was a run in behind the defense from Ferran Torres for that 4th goal. Dembélé feeds him perfectly. And it does say something, too, that when Barcelona are using the center of the field for that final pass, it's a lot easier to shoot when you're right in front of the goal, running onto a ball. We saw Lewandowski do it, and we also saw Ferran Torres do it. Those are goal scorers. And Ferran Torres, something may have been unlocked in him. We knew that his best position is probably as a false 9, but if Lewandowski is going to play almost every minute, it's hard for him to get even a moment on the field. But if there is a role for Ferran Torres, Lewandowski should probably at 34 be rotated occasionally. And Ferran Torres, if the left wing isn't for him, if the right wing isn't for him, it's really interesting to me that Xavi still, with that forward line, because of the things that have gone wrong in the Champions League and not so much in the Liga, I feel like we're constantly dealing with more questions than answers. Ferran Torres answers questions in the Liga, as does Ansu Fati, as does Dembélé. And where Rafinha fits now, having been on the bench for the last 2 games, is he playing against Bayern Munich or isn't he? Who are you trusting against Bayern Munich? And at that point in the day, if Inter Milan does beat Victoria Pilsen already, that game doesn't truly matter. So what is Xavi going to do that is most helpful to this big picture campaign? I think a win no matter what. So who are you putting out there to get a victory against Bayern Munich, regardless of their status in the Champions League? And 5 is home cooking. And speaking of Bayern Munich, that's the match midweek, but it's also at home. And yes, the Champions League results at home have not been what Barcelona wanted, that being just the Inter Milan result. But other than that, the Spotify Camp Nou has been an absolute fortress for this team. We're talking mainly in the Liga, where they have yet to concede a single goal. Now, Ter Stegen did make things interesting late in that game. It took 2 goal line clearances from the Barca defense to make sure that Ter Stegen walked away with another clean sheet. But hey, so even if Ter Stegen occasionally is going to do something like that, I think there were in years past in the Liga that you'd know that ball is going in the back of the net. But Barca's defense has definitely cleaned up. They've been more aware. They've been stronger this season. Even at that point in the game, when you're talking about arguably a tired Bussi and Eric Garcia playing as the right center back, Marcos Alonso playing as the left center back, and still Barcelona were able to keep that one out. So obviously the mood is going to be a bit mixed on Wednesday, going against Bayern Munich after you may already be eliminated in the Champions League. It's going to feel a bit weird. There are no moral victories when it comes to results in football, so on the same day when you're likely knocked out of the Champions League, even a win against Bayern isn't going to feel like a complete victory, but I think it should, and I go into that match as positive as possible. After Villarreal and Athletic Club, Xavi knew he had to shake some things up. He knew he had to, not even individual players, but he knew he had to try some things different. And he cracked the code against Villarreal, figured out what was going to beat them. And then Athletic Club, it had to be a bit different because Athletic Club are different, and he cracked the code again. So can he now crack a third straight and the hardest code to break, but that is Bayern Munich.
And so I'm interested to see what Xavi can do with his team to motivate them and figure more things out this season. Even if they're eliminated from the Champions League, remember, they're still going to be in all competitions, now speaking of the Europa League as well. So we'll worry about that one coming midweek. We got a podcast coming out tomorrow. So subscribe to the channel, you know the deal, so that you don't miss that. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca. What a win for FC Barcelona. To be down 1 goal into 10 men and to come back, 2-0 victory over Osasuna in Navarre. That's one of the best comebacks the Culés have seen in a very long time. And as I just mentioned, the resolve against a really gritty Osasuna team in their own right in Pamplona, well, that makes those 3 points even better. And with that, Barcelona is 5 points atop the table and at least 2 points clear of Real Madrid heading into the international break, depending on the result on Thursday. This is one of those games where I wish I didn't just have 5 headlines because I feel like I need a lot more. And there will be stuff that's going to be left on the cutting room floor that'll have to be saved for a podcast, or things going to be jammed in there where they seem like they don't belong. Either way, let's do it. The 5 headlines from Barcelona's 2-1 victory over Osasuna in the Liga. 1 is proper title race. For those who watch Rayo Vallecano, I know we can get on Real Madrid for not having good performances, but that win for Rayo Vallecano said a lot more about the other team in Madrid than it did about the team in white. They earned those 3 points and beat Real Madrid comprehensively. In the same way that I would have said that Osasuna went out, took it to Barcelona. Yeah, Barcelona were playing poorly, but Osasuna were playing well and deserved something, at least in the first half. Because this is a tough Osasuna team. It's the same team that was fighting for the Europa League spots for quite a long time last season and will likely do the same thing again this year. It's also the same team that took a 1-1 draw off of Real Madrid earlier in this season. So being at home against Barcelona, nothing was guaranteed. And I know the result at the end does change the narrative a little bit, and I do get to take my victory lap when I do say and continue to say that Barcelona are good enough to win the Liga. They have the depth in the squad, but more importantly, for those who said Xavi out, Xavi's been the best manager in the Liga because his team is at the top of the table. Barcelona, for some reason, have a mentality shift when they're in Spain. They believe in themselves. They believe that they get these results no matter who the opponent, with the exception of that Real Madrid game. They seem to flip that switch, and unlike in Europe, where they believe themselves to be second best, in Spain you can see what they think of themselves. Dembélé in the Liga thinks he's the most influential player on the field, and a lot of the time he's right. In Spain, Pedri stands out for doing everything as opposed to Europe, where it seems like he's putting out fires. Even down to 10 men, Xavi made some tweaks and Barcelona played more freely, matching Osasuna stride for stride, even as the home team played a high line and pressured Barcelona deep into their own third. I talk a lot about deserving, and maybe that fight they showed in the second half was enough to convince me that Barcelona deserved the win. And speaking of deserving, I think we actually start by talking about the second goal more than the first, because it was a player that talked this week about wanting to score more goals. And as far as deserving a goal, Rafinha did more than that for that second goal in the game, and the one that would ultimately, of course, be the winner. While Rafinha gets a lot of credit in a second, it starts with Frenkie de Jong. Xavi's decision to switch him as a center back, not to say with 10 men that he had much of a choice, but for much of that time in the first half and to start the second, Barcelona were playing a 4-4-1. And then as subs came on and things got switched up, even prior to the subs, in the late 60s, around the 67th, 68th minute, Xavi did switch it up. And it was de Jong playing largely as a center back in what was kind of a back three, with Balde and Alba both pushing forward a bit more. So Xavi was going for that game. And Frenkie de Jong's positioning, dropping even deeper, was a large part of that. And Frenkie de Jong is a good player, a really talented player who doesn't get to show the best of what he can do. And I kind of said in the past that I like the idea of him as a center back. I don't know how much you could trust it next to Eric Garcia, who does very much the same things, and defensively, there are question marks. So Frenkie de Jong is a center back, there might be some question marks. But there are no questions about the ball he delivered to Rafinha. Just tremendous 10 of 10 ball from Frenkie de Jong over the top, timed perfectly, especially the run, too, from Rafinha, now switching to the Brazilian. Just a perfectly timed run in behind, started from wide, cut it through the middle, and that is the kind of run, and I know that for the first goal, we'll talk about that later, but Ferran Torres' run to bring 2 defenders from Osasuna, it's not worth 55 million euros, in the same way that run from Rafinha alone isn't worth his price tag, and 1 goal isn't worth his price tag. But that is the kind of run, and that is the kind of goal that Barcelona spent money on Rafinha for. That is the kind of single moment that the Brazilian can provide you, and why he was so coveted. What was just as tremendous from Rafinha too was, I think, the decision-making, and this might get lost in the game stories, but the decision he made to, prior to that run,
when that whole action began, he's the one who gets fouled. Instead of dribbling directly at the double team and trying to go around the left back, he cuts inside and kind of holds the man off. Doesn't even pass the ball off and put another team under more pressure. He allows Osasuna to get physical with him, knowing that the game has been tight, a lot of fouls have been called, and he picks up the foul himself. Then a few passes later, and he puts the ball in the back of the net. And it's that kind of difference that is why, again, Barcelona can win the Liga. They do have the quality to score goals like that, and that wound up being game winner. 2 is worst version. Let's be a little negative here because Barcelona did put themselves in a hole. And one of the main reasons for that, or I should say one of the main people that helped lead to that, was the worst version of Sergio Busquets that we have seen this season. There are many who are asking why he's starting. That's totally fair. But going into this game, after what we saw against Almeria, Xavi obviously was happy with what he had seen. So the only change was Christensen coming in for Piqué, which, I mean, in theory, you expect Christensen to do pretty much the exact same thing Piqué did because that should be Christensen level. So I think that lineup is exactly the same because if it's not broke, don't fix it. That's kind of been Xavi's philosophy when picking his lineup. So that's why he kept the same 11 that he did. Well, basically 10 of the 11 that he did against Almeria. And again, I'm not surprised. I don't know why people were surprised why he would drop Busquets right before the international break when some players are going to get time off. Sure, many of them will be going to World Cup, but at least all the players that featured today will be getting 2 weeks or so until they have to actually play another game that matters. So it is going to be a lot of training, a lot of working through some things. You know, maybe a little bit of rest, but largely they're going to be traveling, and I know that is worrisome for these players, but even some of those players might crash out in the group stage. Who knows? Some of them may really only have 3 matches in the next month and a half. You'd expect some of those countries to go farther, but again, who knows? Back to focusing on Busquets, this started early. In the 6th minute, Ter Stegen's in a bit of trouble, but Busquets, his first touch, absolutely lets him down. He winds up rolling the ball across himself and putting it right in the path of Osasuna. And Barcelona were very fortunate that Marcos Alonso was there to block that out. Goes to the corner, Osasuna keep up the pressure, and it leads to a goal anyway. Busquets also at fault for the goal. He lost him unless someone else has any other explanation. I can't see it. It looks like it was just Busquets losing a 1v1 battle in such a fashion. Any protests? I don't know. I felt like in the moment I said they were undeserved. It was definitely a goal, yes, and I think it takes a lot of contact to nullify a goal. But I also hear the argument that Marcos Alonso being, tackled. A tackle is a word that we use in the sport, so that's not even fair. He was completely manhandled, just decimated. There's nothing that Marcos, as much as people don't like Marcos Alonso, there's nothing he could do. He was just eviscerated like a rhino, like a juggernaut, whatever you have, like that Marvel Comics character. And so Marcos Alonso definitely fouled, but again, I don't know what kind of contact is necessary to nullify a goal in that situation because yes, Marcos Alonso probably could have headed that away, and that ball basically goes through the space that he was. So that would be the reasoning as to why VAR should probably overturn that, because if that kind of contact happens away from the shot, I think, again, because David Garcia just won the 1v battle against Busquets, the VAR ignores it completely anyway. And I think that's kind of where they landed, or, hey, maybe they got it wrong. Either way, Busquets is culpable for the goal. We're not going to rewrite history on that. But before people go crazy about the back line and Barcelona, the big picture about Barcelona's defense falling apart, they have kept clean sheets in 11 of the 14 matches this season. So I think we got to cry over different things. That back line for Barcelona has been really good this season, and this is a mistake by an individual player. He continued it in the 16th minute, dispossessed, almost another goal. In the 20th minute, misplays a pass where Barcelona should have been off to the races. For the first 20 minutes of that game, Busquets, it was about as calamitous as we have seen from him in quite some time. And one of those performances, I think, honestly, that Xavi has to look at very much like Piqué against Inter. That Xavi has to look at that performance and ask some major questions. Frankie de Jong played really well in that game, and Busquets played terribly. And as Levon and I spoke about yesterday on the podcast, does Barcelona lose when Frankie de Jong plays well? Well, the answer here in the inverse is that Barcelona were still able to win despite Busquets playing poorly, which I think goes a long way into telling you that Barcelona might be okay if they start to phase him out quite a bit in the second half of the season. 3 is surprisingly reckless. 2 yellow cards from Lewandowski in 31 minutes. Is it uncharacteristic? Of course it is. He's only been sent off once in his entire career prior to this. That was back in 2013 when he was playing for Dortmund against Hamburg. And again, he was a young player at the time. That was almost 10 years ago. So Lewandowski, you'd expect that, he would have had a cooler head, but both of those yellows were yellows. He didn't get a full solid red. It wasn't like one rush of blood to the head where he was injuring a player. 2 yellow cards that were deserved. The first one was a yellow,
And the second one wasn't watching the ball at all. Just went and tackled the man, jumped into him, and that's going to be a yellow every time. And for the idea that a second yellow needs even more contact, well, I think he gave that to you. I think it was deserving of even a second yellow, which, as we always say, I mean, whether it's fair or not, referees do give a longer leash. The problem with the yellow isn't necessarily about that Lewandowski was sent off, because I think people bring up, obviously, the role of the referee in Gil Manzano, who in the past has sent off Messi and Neymar and Luis Suarez, and does have a habit of taking it to the big stars and giving them red cards. But the problem with Manzano wasn't just the double yellow, it was that he lost control of the match very early. By handing out that 10th minute yellow to Lewandowski, it set a precedent. And he just was handing those yellow cards out like water for Barcelona. On the other side for Osasuna, they were getting yellows late, but they probably deserved some earlier yellow cards in the game, where their tactical fouling, which was praised when Bayern Munich did against Barcelona, but it was a bit excessive for Osasuna, especially when they're playing at home, especially when they're up a man. And they should be taking more advantage of space than they should be trying to hack Barcelona down to disrupt a game that was already disorganized because, again, there's one less man playing for the opposition. It's a weird one from Lewandowski, something you really don't expect and shouldn't expect for maybe another 10 years if he's still playing at that point. But unfortunately, he will be missing the Espanyol fixture when Barcelona return from the little break here. So Lewandowski, yeah, this will be remembered in about a month and a half time, but I'm going to probably forget about it by then. 4 is fighting back. When Ferran Torres was called offside for a goal, the delivery from Jordi Alba was a pretty good delivery. Some may have had this reaction that, oh, Barcelona are going to do this. They're going to come close, but they're going to fall short. But I think what that goal that was called offside indicated was that Barca figured out and found a way through Osasuna. Basically the last 5 to 8 minutes of that first half, even down 10 men. And in that second half, they expounded upon that and showed you with that Pedri goal that they had figured out Osasuna, even with their 11 men to their 10. It doesn't happen often, and it's hard to make this kind of history, but this was a historic comeback in that Barcelona away from home, after being down at halftime and down a man, they'd only ever achieved 2 draws with those circumstances. A draw at the Vicente Calderón against Atletico Madrid back in 1970, and a 3-3 against Rayo Vallecano in 1992. So for them to come back and win, for the first time ever, being down a goal and down a man at halftime, that just shows you the fight and resolve that this team has. And as much as I've been on Busquets and said that he didn't have a good first half or first 20, 25, 30 minutes, he did rebound in the second half to, even when legs were tired, be in the right spots, shut down space, and shuttle the ball around the way he was supposed to. But there are other players around him as Busquets kind of brought that level down from, we'll say, drowning to kind of just floating there on the surface. Some of his other teammates raised their level. And I do especially have to focus on, we'll say, the left-footed defenders in this game. Well, I mean, Christensen was good too, but this might have been Marcos Alonso's best game in an FC Barcelona uniform. He was just tidy on the day, made all the right decisions, and defended for his life. Jordi Alba, really good as well. Positionally, very smart, and especially in the second half, when Barcelona, even it was 1-1, and a draw I felt was necessary, he controlled that left side so well. He was a calming influence to Ansu when he came on, to Gabi on the left wing when he had to push out, and even when Barcelona were playing in that 4-4-1, when they were down 10 men in the first half, he was supporting Pedri in really good ways when Pedri was forced out wide, and positionally, yeah, Alba was really there. And again, his final ball set up the offside goal that's won, but he also set up the second goal with Pedri. And good on Barcelona for that immediate response. Ferran Torres, who also had a good day. It was a quick warning shot from him, and then a nice delivery from Alba for Torres. The deflection back to Pedri arriving in the box. And I thought it was a rather simple finish, having watched it live, but for him to choose to go near post and get it through the goalkeeper and the 2 defenders, it was a good piece of finishing by Pedri. And much I can praise Alonso and Alba, I think the success of those left backs and those left-footed defenders was highlighted by Balde in his 61st minute. He got an earlier yellow, just showing how excessive, as I said, that Manzano was with his yellows, but immediately responds and has a tremendous run coming from outside, inside, going forward. And it seemed like Barcelona dribbled themselves out of pressure each time they needed to. And it was a different player, whether it was Alba, whether it was De Jong, whether it was Balde, whether it was Pedri. They seemed to have an answer for Osasuna and took it to them with their superior technical ability. Xavi did worry me a little bit, though, in that fight back. I think he was trusting in his 10 a bit too much. I was wondering where the subs were coming.
right around the 65th minute, and then the 70th minute, just wondering when are reinforcements coming in for these tired legs. I felt like a go-ahead goal was coming for Osasuna because they were putting pressure on Barcelona, but Xavi stayed the course, kept the ship tight, and then came the subs, Gabi in the 74th minute, and then Ansu and Rafinha in the 78th. But as I said earlier, prior to that, he did move De Jong to center back, so he was making adjustments even if he didn't change personnel. And even Chadi Riyad coming off the bench late, and there was that important play where he could have even had a dangerous play where he put his head in. The guy almost kicked him, that being Budimir in the head. So Riyad making his first team debut in a really important moment as Barcelona are nearing stoppage time in the game. They're up 2-1. A lot of trust Xavi putting in a youngster. And I'm hoping that does indicate to us that he might trust him as the fifth center back instead of going out in the market in January and reinforcing a position that, again, with four solid center backs, I don't necessarily think you need an extra one. And headline 5 is Swan Song for PK. I did have to mention this because I do think it was fitting that his final game was at the Spotify Camp Nou, or the Camp Nou in front of that crowd, giving the speech, tears rolling down his face, and saying goodbye in that manner. I think that was the right way for him to go out. But instead, PK, I mean, what can you say about PK, right? Going out at halftime, giving Manzano an earful, getting sent off in the tunnel, that ends his FC Barcelona career, that ends his professional footballing career. That sums up PK in a nutshell. Gave everything to the badge, saw him at home, again, tears, all the emotion, all those things, then goes out on the road to another place in the Liga where I have to remind you, other than Catalonia, where the Spanish national team never really play games, PK used to be booed around Spain when he played for Spain almost everywhere. And you get the sentiment that he's always going to be that agitator, no matter what. When he comes back to Barcelona and he's sitting in, whether it's a president's box or one of those suites or whatever, he's always going to get some eyeballs on him and the attention because he always pokes the bear and says the right thing and says the wrong thing at the wrong and the right times. It's just the way PK is. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that he gets sent off at halftime, so it doesn't end his Barcelona career on the field. He ends it by getting sent off, and this somehow just a fitting an end to his career, as was the home match where he, again, had the crowd in the palm of his hand and everybody's cheering, and it's this emotional and fantastic moment to end it all. So there you go. Hats off to you, PK, and hats off to FC Barcelona. Again, this comeback marks the end of this first half of the season, if you will, because now they're off until December 31st, so the New Year's Eve against Espanyol, where they face a dreaded rival without Lewandowski, but they will do it on the top of the table. Is it 2 points? Is it 3 points? Is it 5 points? We'll have to see on Thursday with Real Madrid results. Either way, I'm going to have a lot of content, including a podcast, a big podcast with a special guest coming out later this week, and then plenty of content throughout the break. Make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to the channel and share it, all those different things. You know it's a big help, and I do appreciate everybody being with me for the first part of this season as I did all these podcasts and match reviews and all this different content. So I'm going to keep trying to keep it up as long as I can. As I said, positive comments and support and all those different things. Following us on social media in all these different ways is really helpful as well. And again, sharing it to anybody who may want it. Not just on YouTube, but other places as well. Always a big help. So again, thank you so much as always. And until next time, Forza Barça. 3 points of Atletico Madrid is a huge result. And some people will say that the 1-0 is just about the result. And there were some worrying signs in that game because we will get to that one negative headline. But Barca beat Atleti at their place with better quality and a better game plan, returning the two favorites that Diego Simeone delivered them in the last few seasons. So yeah, I am going to make that argument that Barcelona won this game not because they were playing ugly, but because they were better, they were more talented, and they had a better game plan, and they deserved the victory. So here I am trying to be positive with the 5 headlines for Barcelona's 1-0 win over Atletico Madrid. 1 is on the front foot. While this stat doesn't really shape up to too much because Ansu didn't have an amazing day, this was the first time ever that Pedri, Araujo, and Ansu Fati had started for Barcelona together. Because we will talk about 2 of those 3 players quite a bit throughout this game. Xavi and that 11, it didn't pick itself, and Xavi had a lot of work to do tactically to get this right. And why Barcelona more than anything won this match? Because Barcelona and Xavi got it right from the very beginning. The idea was to put pressure on Atletico Madrid and pin them back as far as humanly possible. They like to defend so much, then let's try to match them with their own game. They play a 5-3-2, well, let's play something that looks like a 3-4-3, or what turns into this 3-5-2 type situation at times when we're defending, and let's basically mirror them and play their own game better than them because we individually have more talent. And that worked out for Barcelona because that was true. Xavi's goal, and it didn't happen all the time when Barcelona lost control, we'll get to that in a second, But Xavi's goal and Barcelona were playing well, and why they even scored the goal was that they won those 3v2 battles in the middle of the field. In possession, it was a 3-4-3, as I said, or a 3-2-2-3, honestly, with Balde's body orientation being really important. He had to be ready to attack and defend, and he didn't get caught out until the 37th minute, and that led to a poor shot from Molina. And Balde, as time went on, looked like he was a little overmatched in the game, but still, the formation and the idea on how to even protect Balde was right. Barcelona showcased the best of Xavi's idea, on the goal, but even before that, there was a beautiful run of play in the 10th minute, exactly what Barca wanted to do. Get Pedri the ball, coming in for something, 1 or 2 touch into the half spaces. Strengthen that space with Balde going wide, and instead of cycling all the way back to defenders, cycle right back to that midfield of either Busquets or De Jong. Goes to De Jong, puts it over to Gavi, to Dembele, and while he did miss that one, it showed you that Barcelona could have some success moving the ball quickly horizontally, right around Atleti's 18-yard box. And that pressure continued on for the first 26 minutes of that game, where Barcelona continued to wear down Atletico Madrid and try to find those spaces in between their lines. Headline 2 is against the elements, because nothing was guaranteed in this match based on that rain. In theory, the sloppy play and the fouls and things like that should have supported Atletico Madrid. But in the same way that I had a headline the other day where I absolutely terrorized Mateo Lahoz, and he should have been, he even had the week off because he did so poorly for the last 2 weeks. But the inverse of that is I have to do a bit of praising for Jose Luis Montero because he was good. He didn't choose to make this game about himself, and I felt like the cards that were given out in this game, even though he got a bunch of calls wrong, many of which went in Barcelona's favor, to be honest with you, but I thought he was just kind of solid in this game, and I bet I'm a bit biased because Atletico Madrid fans are going to be hard done by with some of the calls that didn't go their way, but I think there were some Atleti probably won as well, and I think the elements made it really tough for everybody, including him, so I do give him a little bit more of a leash today. With or without the weather, Atleti's only way forward was on the counter, and as I had previously said, they didn't get their first of that until the 18th minute, which tells you that Barcelona were keeping up that pressure and pinning them back regardless of the conditions. Another one of the reasons I compliment Barcelona is because so many of those Atletico Madrid moments in this game came as a repercussion of the poor weather going on. Whether it was Ter Stegen having some trouble on the crosses or corners, Barca slipping in the second half. And I don't just mean the performance, I mean physically. I particularly think of Kessie in his own box falling to the ground, giving Atletico Madrid some lifelines. And then Christensen picking up a yellow in the 82nd minute because he lost his footing. They had to clean up his mess. And it's certainly incredible that Gavi was given the Man of the Match award because I keep thinking throughout the game of Gavi's shoelaces. Are they going to get stuck in, well, it's not really mud, but are they going to get stuck? And are they going to slip? Is he going to trip on him? Hopefully not. And so for Gavi to play as well as he did, regardless of his shoelaces, well, I guess this Against the Elements headline isn't much of a headline at all. 3 is Pedri makes up his mind. This game came down to 1 goal, so I think it's important to really highlight this goal. It is the brainchild of Pedri and Gavi and Dembele. A lot of credit goes to this whole team for building up to that goal. As I keep saying, creating the pressure, that back line, we'll get to them later, but that back line being as solid as they were, raising the line of confrontation. Once again, this goal comes because Barcelona were having a field day in Atletico Madrid's half in that first half. First goal was scored because Pedri changed things up. And a lot of credit to the young player for doing that. First time he does change things up in the 20th minute, instead of just recycling play around and continuing to put them under pressure by trying to use the wings, Pedri fakes a pass out to the left. Koke and Molina make the mistake. Both went to cut off that perpendicular pass back to Christensen, expecting Pedri to want to recycle, which is what he kept doing for the first 20 minutes. But then Pedri looks, Griezmann coming up on his back, and Barrios doesn't step to him to come inside. Pedri just dribbles forward. It seemed like the space in front of him was really obvious that he just dribbled into that space, but that wasn't the game plan. That wasn't the idea that Xavi was trying to go with, and that wasn't the patience that Pedri has in his game, almost to a fault. So by dribbling forward in that instance, it just opened everything up. Atletico Madrid were scrambling for the first time. He finds Gavi, who held it up well enough to move on Dembele, and Gavi maybe committed a foul. Who knows? I don't think so. Goes on to Dembele, who found his spot and put it in there. He's not always clinical, but Dembele, if you give him enough opportunities, he will show you his class. Felt like Barcelona and Pedri weren't done there, though. Pedri almost got another one a few moments later when Atleti tried to give him a goal. Running in behind, but Molina comes back to cut it out. That came from pressure from Busquets, Dembele, and Ansu Fati, who was dropping in. And while it seems like Ansu wasn't a part of Gavi and Araujo and the stars of the future, his work rate in the 54 minutes he was on the field were essential to that pressure. If the number 9 today for Barcelona was not putting Oblak under pressure, was not making sure that those center backs in Savic and in Jimenez did not have time on the ball, then Atletico Madrid would have been able to carve open Barcelona through the middle of the field. Because obviously Busquets, and we know how slow he can be, wasn't necessarily able to cover all that ground. and De Jong at times was dragged out to the wings. So there could have been moments when Griezmann would have found space in the middle of the field and would be able to get it out to the wings, where obviously Llorente and Carrasco are always a difficulty for Barcelona. We saw some of that in this game, but by and large, the work rate of Ansu and Dembele up top as well, pressing, and that rest defense that we talk about, losing the ball and being prepared to get it right back. I think that was important for Ansu to have a day like this where, again, he didn't get the goal and it might not help his confidence, but I think he should be proud of the showing and the minutes that he put in against Atletico Madrid. While Ansu didn't have the effect he wanted to have and Dembele was hot and cold and hot enough to get the goal, this game I think all came down to Pedri and Gavi and whether or not they could raise their level. And because they did, Barcelona I think comes away with the 1-0, other than the other man of the match, and that being Ronald Araujo. One thing I noticed about Pedri and Gavi today, and this had to have been on purpose with the number of times I saw it, when Ter Stegen would have the ball, and he was looking to get it out wide, Pedri and Gavi were directing Ter Stegen. You could see them even gesturing, saying, well, get it to my wing. When I'm out there, we're going to try to play on Dembele and get forward. On the other side, it was Balde. So Pedri would, if he had a man on his back, say, no, let's switch to the other side and try to build up through the right center back in that situation. And Gavi would do the opposite on the other side. It was either long ball out to Gavi, with Dembele pushing forward and Koundé tucked in. So if you do lose that 50-50, you have that other defender in, we'll say, a center back of a back three, either as Christensen on the left or Koundé on the right, to win that second ball. So Gavi and Pedri were given the responsibility to decide whether or not Barcelona were going to try and attempt some kind of 50-50 ball to win on the wings. And I think they got it right a bunch of times. Ter Stegen misplayed a ball or two on the ground, but I thought Ter Stegen's decision-making and work with Pedri and Gavi and their choices, whether or not the defender was close enough behind them to chance that ball, was right a lot of the time and allowed Barcelona to play at a pressure. I want to remind you too that Atletico Madrid is required a lot higher of a standard than who their midweek opponent was in Intercity. I was really critical of Barcelona because you have to beat a team like CF Intercity, go after them, get after it, and just beat them with your dominating talent and reputation and all those things that go into being FC Barcelona. Atletico Madrid, though, requires a much higher standard, and you have to be good for a whole game. This is the kind of team, that being Atletico Madrid, that even though they're having their best season under Diego Simeone, they're going to have one or two moments every single contest where they can get you. And Barcelona had to be up to that occasion, and today they were. In multiple headlines, I'm going to talk about Ronald Araujo. Let's do it for the first time here. I was so impressed and so happy to see him back when there was that deflected shot from Llorente, when he brings his arm into his chest. It seemed like VAR, with any slight opportunity to give a penalty, they might have, and Barcelona did not give them a single chance to give a penalty to Atletico Madrid today. Ronald Araujo, fantastic in that moment, and while there was one moment that Araujo was not good, he winds up not winning a header that was wide open for Jimenez in the 33rd minute. That was the time, that was the opportunity Atletico should have tied this game up. The header goes wide on an open net, but again, the high standard that's required for Barcelona is because you have to understand, you almost in your game plan say there's going to be one or two times Atletico Madrid might even get one off us, but we just have to finish this game with one more goal than them. Whether it was 2-1, whether it was 1-0, regardless of what it was, Atletico Madrid required a high standard, and Barcelona delivered on that today. 4 is when not to lose control. This is where I'm going to go against what I just said in my last headline, that Barcelona were dominating and better and deserved the victory and all those things. Because while Atletico Madrid does deserve a high standard, Barca did lose control of this match when they should still have had control of it. The calls that were going their way, as I already mentioned, were very helpful to keeping Barcelona in the driver's seat. It also seemed to emotionally and mentally take Atleti out of the game quite a bit in that first half. But once Barca scored that goal, that was the spark that Atletico Madrid needed. It's like that goal almost hurt Barcelona in their control of this match. Because once that happened, Atletico Madrid got a bit more vertical, they pushed farther forward, they put Ter Stegen and those center backs under more pressure, and instead of letting them and allowing them to break through the middle, they forced everything out to the wings the way I think they were supposed to by Simeone to start this game, and they just didn't do it. Whether it was Koke, whether it was Molina, they didn't have the fight and desire in the middle of the field they needed. Griezmann really raised his level when Atletico Madrid took control of this match as well. And the subs of both these teams are interesting because I felt at that point, when the subs came on in the 57th minute, it kind of felt like neither team. It had been Barcelona for so much of the first half. Atletico Madrid takes control, we'll say, in the latter half of the first half into the second half. Then the subs come in, and I think, I don't want to credit Xavi with this, but once they did come in, then nobody had control of this match for the rest of the contest. With Ansu and Frankie de Jong being substituted for Ferran Torres and Frank Kessié, there wasn't much of a drop-off. I think this is a polarizing performance for de Jong, because de Jong's performance was good, but it was depending on whether Barca had control of the game or not. When Barca didn't have control, De Jong looked pretty pedestrian. It looked like he was a bit too casual with the ball, wasn't defending the way we expect him to do. But when Barcelona had possession and had the ball, he was moving it quickly, horizontally, vertically, running, chasing it down, and positioning-wise was covering for Busquets and covering in behind Pedri to allow Pedri to go farther forward. So while De Jong didn't have these special moments with him on the ball, he was following the game plan and doing what he needed to do to help all those players around him. And I think De Jong's performance is what helped Busquets to play well, it helped Gavi play well, and helped Pedri do well, and I want to compliment De Jong on that. But when Atletico Madrid took control of this game, De Jong really, really suffered. And these are the kind of games where you want De Jong to give you more. And I think that's more about the big narrative than it is about the 90 minutes we watched with De Jong just today. Atleti also, by making some of their subs, gave something up. When Alvaro Morata came on the field, as the first center forward that this game actually saw, Atleti weren't able to hold the ball up any greater. It gave them an extra threat in the box, which we'll talk about in our last headline, but it didn't do much for them in terms of getting forward on the counter. It didn't really help. Not like Morata held the ball up too much. If anything, it left more space now on the wings because there was nobody coming over and covering on the wings. So Ronaldo at that point started losing track of Dembélé as the second half wore on. And for what I said about De Jong, I can say a similar thing about Franck Kessié, but I thought he was actually enough chaos that was definitely a net positive here in the second half. Barcelona did retake control of the match in the 67th minute, I thought, for a little bit of a stretch, once they were able to pin Atletico Madrid back again. And at that point, I did have to say it was one of the better appearances I thought from Kessié, even in such a limited amount of time. While Barca did lose control again less than 10 minutes later, Kessié was pretty disciplined in when he was choosing to get forward, to push up and be that extra midfielder along that five going forward, again, to pin and be the mirror image of what Atletico Madrid were doing. And even with the weather, he was clean enough and good enough on the ball and understanding the situation when he held the ball up and got fouled, that's how to get a victory on the day. There in the last 20 minutes, Gavi comes off for Rafinha, Lamar and Correa come on for Atletico Madrid, for João Felix and Koke, and at that point, Atletico Madrid were kind of throwing everything against the wall. And while we see it from Barcelona's perspective, why is Barcelona just surviving? Why aren't they pushing forward for that second goal and just putting this game away? But for Atletico Madrid, they didn't have much of an answer either. So put yourself in the shoes of the fans of the mattress makers. When you're trailing like that, 1-0, the choices that are made, if you come back, are brilliant. If they're not, then they weren't the right decision. So taking off Koke and João Felix wound up being a decision by Diego Simeone that didn't pay dividends. Because Correa, while he did have some opportunities, he just wasn't really what that game needed, and Lamar barely touched the ball at all. Which takes us to headline 5, which was nervy ending. Because all of those changes, the different formations, and people have different roles, even Rafinha playing on the left instead of the right in a different spot, so that means he's going to defend on the opposite foot. All those little nuances created a lot of chaos, and that chaos could have supported Atletico Madrid, but it didn't because Barcelona were up to it. Now I get to praise the defense. Christensen, is he one of the best center backs in the world? No. But is he all that Barcelona needs from their third, maybe second, third? We'll have to talk about the Koundé Christensen on a podcast, but as being one of the third option center backs for Barcelona, is he all he needs to be? Of course. He is at that level, certainly. He has barely put a foot wrong for this club since he arrived. Koundé, coming in as a right center back / right back, was all he needed to be, combining well with Dembélé. Clearly, those two have some chemistry, which is really nice to see throughout this game. Maybe it's the French connection, of course, playing together at the World Cup, but they do seem to have an understanding. And Koundé's ability to get forward, we know he could do it. We saw it for Sevilla, and seeing just little glimmers of it for Barcelona get me excited for what he's going to be able to do even more so when he's not having to worry about Piqué behind him and he's looking over his shoulder and going, oh, Araujo's got my back. I can get forward a little bit more now. And I was really happy too, as much as Marcos Alonso being on the field late is terrorizing for culés, he had a nice header away under pressure late in that game as he was nearing stoppage time. And I said, Barcelona kept doing enough. Between Roberto, Alonso, Araujo, when Morata tries to go down in the box, none of them fouled him, so they don't get the PK late when Atletico Madrid were looking for it. Good on all of them. I think Roberto and Alonso, who are always under a lot of pressure. And then Savic and Ferran Torres both getting reds late in this match, telling you that this was really a good old-fashioned wrestling match there in the second half, like Atletico Madrid wanted. And Barcelona mirrored them tactically and mirrored them in the intensity of this game. And those are the intangibles that we always say are missing, that killer instinct, that desire and need to get those 3 points from Barcelona. You saw it in Ferran Torres. He was not going to be pushed around by Savic. Yes, he misses the next match. That's a bummer. But for Ferran Torres to just kind of stand up for himself, Savic gets sent off. Having only 10 men was supporting Barcelona because they were able to keep Ronald Araujo and Christensen. Losing their forward, again, for one of Atletico Madrid's bigger set-piece pieces, winds up being a good thing for Barcelona. And I'm sorry for making you wait so long, but I'm pretty much ending this all about Ronald Araujo. Incredible day for Ronald Araujo, and I'm just so happy to see him back. That save in the 94th minute, and there were other plays as I already mentioned, but in the 94th minute, that save off the goal line, what a save that was. And while you say, I don't know how much he knew of it, his eyes were directly on the ball. He knew exactly what he was doing in that moment. And that is tremendous from Araujo, which makes me give you a little hyperbole with the bigger picture stuff. It reminds me that, one, if he was healthy, there is, not saying no doubt, there's a 98% chance in my mind that Barcelona are playing the knockouts of the Champions League. No way do they concede half the goals they conceded when he was not on the field in the Champions League campaign. Second thing that save made me feel and realize is that Barcelona could have, with just one heel of Ron Araujo, gotten the 2 points that might be necessary to win them the title this season. Liga might come down that close. It is a two-horse race, especially with Atletico Madrid being buried by 3 points in this one too. It is a two-horse race between the two biggest teams in Spain. And getting this against the third biggest team in Spain could pay huge dividends at the end of the year. And number three, and this is the most important one, is I miss Ron Araujo. He is so freaking good at defending. You look at me, right? You know that even when I played the sport, what he does and what I do were probably different things. And he does so many things. It's almost a different sport to me when I watch him physically, speed-wise, his awareness on corners, defending, all those little different things. And to the very end, Ter Stegen setting up his wall, getting the deflection, and Araujo on the header, getting it clear as the whistle basically blew. That is why people said he might be a future captain for Barcelona, that being Ron Araujo. And that's the kind of effort, intensity, and winning plays that not only are going to make him an important player for Barcelona, he already is, but remind you, he is their best defender. He may not be able to build up, and all those different things he can't do with his feet are completely forgivable because he wins you games like this. Didn't put the team completely on his back. Dembélé, Pedri, Gavi, Busquets. I said there was a lot of players who played well, but Ron Araujo was a star for me, and he would have been my man of the match. So there it is, the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 1-0 win over Atletico Madrid. We're going to have the podcast tomorrow. We're going to continue to break down some of these tactics, get into the little nuances of this game. What a tremendous victory it was. I know it didn't feel like that. It was wet, it was muddy, all those different things, but this was a fantastic result for Barcelona and their hopes of winning the Liga and that trophy that Xavi desperately needs. So I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe to the channel, do all that stuff, and we'll see you next time. Until next time, Forza Barca. 3-1 over Real Madrid feels pretty good for culés. Of course it does. But I gotta say, having seen El Clásicos aplenty over the last few decades, that a trophy always feels even better. Regardless of the venue or the prestige of the Spanish Super Cup, a reminder that Barcelona being the second place in the Liga from a season ago would not have been invited a few years ago, well, let's get rid of all that stuff because this could be a pivotal moment in the new chapter for FC Barcelona. And if you're new here, welcome to the Barcelona podcast universe. We have headlines, podcasts, history, and much more. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything because I've got a podcast coming out in a few hours. But either way, you came here for the headlines, so here they are. The 5 headlines from Barcelona's 3-1 victory over Real Madrid in the Spanish Super Cup final for Xavi's first trophy. Because that's headline 1. This is Xavi's first trophy as manager of FC Barcelona. It's been a long wait. Many have called for his head, but he finally got it done. And what I'm most impressed by Xavi, because I know we're celebrating at the end of 90 minutes, but I feel like Xavi had this one, not to say won, the players on the field still had to do the work, and we're going to praise them aplenty. But you could tell from minute 1 that Xavi had his tactics right, he has 11 tidy, and he was ready to go. He had motivated his team, and he had done all the work necessary to win a trophy. It was just a matter of whether or not his players could deliver, in which they did. And of course for me, in my defenses of Xavi, telling you that his ideas, he seems to be a little bit too pragmatic at times as the game goes on. His substitutes can be questioned, and his in-game management can be questioned, but he seems to always be prepared in the right way. That's a mark of a good coach, at least in the future, and you can tell that learning on the job, he's figuring things out. Because this team, that being Barcelona, scored their second goal and didn't allow Real Madrid back in the game, that proved to be the difference. And as you remember from Real Betis, Atletico Madrid, any of the other games that Barcelona seemed to lose control, if they do score that second goal, they completely take the wind out of their opponent's sails, and that's the difference for Barca in every game. They're good enough to win any contest, but it's whether or not they allow the other team to find a lifeline. When we talk about that 11 and what Xavi got right, it was Gavi on the left instead of Pedri, which is a bit of a surprise because we've seen Pedri be the left winger when forced into that, kind of a 4-3-3, but really a 3-2-5 when Barcelona are in possession. But today it was Pedri as the attacking midfielder coming to the right in front of Busquets and De Jong. De Jong either parallel or slightly ahead of Busquets depending on Madrid's positioning. Then of course Araujo at right back was the other big one, and as I said on Twitter Spaces before, to shout out to Barca Spaces, that Araujo at right back in the preseason, well, that helped Barcelona keep a clean sheet, led them to a 1-0 win over Real Madrid in the United States. And then in October, when Barcelona lost 3-1, well, it was Roberto against Vinny Jr. And no disrespect to Barcelona's second captain, but Roberto against Vinny Jr. was always going to end that way. And the other thing to note is Barcelona, while it seems like on paper, with Busquets especially, they should be trying to man-mark Real Madrid out of this game. They didn't. Unlike Real Betis, where their man-marking system worked to good effect, they did change things up, and they went with a zonal marking system, and that worked. Their communication was superb, handing off Vinny Jr., of course, and we can talk about the center backs as well, but that midfield that we're going to praise aplenty in this 5 headlines, they did a great job communicating, handing off those wingers, even the fullbacks who were trying to invert in, and the midfielders for Real Madrid that were trying to occupy space in the center of the field. Barcelona controlled the center of the park, and they controlled this game. And what was interesting to me, just like Atletico Madrid, that Real Madrid were playing basically the inverse of what Barca were playing, or should I say, I think Barca, because they're a little more adaptable, were playing the inverse of what Real Madrid were playing. Madrid were playing a 4-4-2 with the 2 forwards up top being a number 9, an elite striker, and then a winger, being Vinny Jr., an elite winger, who's able to kind of come inside when he wants, get out to the wing when he wants to. On the left side, Dembélé, of course, doing the same thing on the right. And then a bit of a diamond midfield, or a square midfield, depending on the setup and the positioning of the opponent, as I mentioned. So now for the third straight game, that being Atletico Madrid, Real Betis, and Real Madrid, Xavi didn't necessarily play Xavi ball or 4-3-3 or some dogmatic Barcelona system. He kind of mirrored his opponent and did it better than they did. And that, I think, is a mark of a coach that knows what he's going to be doing. Even again, if his in-game management and substitutes are still something that we're going to question him for. And then lastly, what really won Xavi this trophy is what I think I'm hopefully going to take away from more than anything else. Yeah, there were superior performances from so many of the Barca players. But Xavi not only had his team motivated, but when they scored the first goal of the game, they earned the goal, they deserved the goal, and they got their goal. Doesn't always happen for Barca, but it did this time. And instead of letting Real Madrid back into this game, I don't know what Xavi had said in the locker room. It probably had something to do with what he said in the middle of the halftime of extra time against Real Betis. A little bit of that motivation. Whatever he said, whatever his plan was, it worked. Because Barcelona immediately retook possession. They won that second ball right off that kickoff from Real Madrid. And then they kind of took the air out of any hopes of a comeback that Real Madrid had. And I think that kind of mental fortitude, and who knows what's happening psychologically, but that mental fortitude is what can take this Barcelona team to the next level. Headline 2 is set the pace, keeping that theme up that Barcelona from minute 1 deserved. They really did outplay their opponent from minute 1 on. They're the team who had the first 3 chances of this game. The first chance comes for Barcelona, Araujo at the back post on a free kick delivery from Pedri. Madrid holding their high line far enough forward where Araujo couldn't get to it, but that was the initial warning shot. Second chance comes for Barca too. Gavi delivering it to Lewandowski on the glancing header. Lewandowski probably offside anyway, but Barcelona continuing to figure things out. Then the third chance to Barca. Wonderful from Gavi, we'll get to him next, into the half space. Lewandowski's powerful shot saved by Courtois, who was the reason why Real Madrid didn't lose this game by more than 3-1. And then it was off the post and Balde blasted over. Balde's probably his worst moment in the match. The fourth chance of the game finally goes to Madrid. Benzema misses on the header, and other than Benzema's goal later on, if you had told me that would be, that first chance for Real Madrid and the fourth total chance in the whole game would be Madrid's best opportunity other than the goal, it'd be a bit surprising. But that meant that Barcelona suffocated Real Madrid in this game. They're the only ones, that being Barca, that had life. Headline 3 is Gavi's world. In the 22nd minute, Ron Araujo blasted this long diagonal ball to that far sideline. And Gavi got on his horse, did everything he needed to do to save that ball. And that is what Kool-Aid associate with Gavi. That effort, that desire, that fight. He had a scrap where he was offside, he disagreed. We see that emotion. So we kind of personify Gavi in a certain way. But this was the kind of perfect Gavi performance that tells you the superstar that he can be. Of course, it's the goal and the assist and what the second should have been an assist. It was a deflected shot that we'll get to. But Gavi was magnanimous in this game. But not only is he a future star and maybe current star in the grit, the fight, the desire, all those intangibles that we love about Gavi, but he also has the talent, the positional awareness, and the ability to improve that's going to make him a mainstay here at Barcelona for a long time, that we can understand and quantify, that we can explain this is why Gavi is so great on the field. It's not just all those things that make him try really, really hard, because a lot of players can try really, really hard, but they can't do what we saw from Gavi tonight. And the reason it's Gavi's world too is because he had his fingerprints all over all 3 goals. The first goal of the game in the 34th minute, it was Gavi's goal. Against Carvajal, just lifting that ball over the hand of Courtois on the finish. Rudiger was the one who gave it away. Busquets wins it off Camavinga. Dembélé to Pedri to Lewandowski to Gavi. And this is really important too in this build-up. It was one touch from Dembélé and Pedri. It was 2 touches from Lewandowski, but his first touch set up his second touch, so it wasn't a long touch that broke things down. So pretty much 4 perfect touches from, well, even 5 counting Busquets' win, from Dembélé to Pedri to Lewandowski, finally into Gabi, who takes 1 touch, puts himself in position, and then fired with his non-dominant left foot. Second goal right before halftime, Busquets, a through ball to De Jong, and De Jong just able to toe poke it ahead to Gabi, who was onside, forcing Rudiger over to Gabi, and Lewandowski was behind Militao and Camavinga to score the second. Credit to Lewandowski, too, in that build-up, because for Lewandowski to even get a goal in this game is kind of a surprise, and you understand that for him to go full 90, after what we saw him, the way he was laboring in the 25th minute, had to come off the field, get some help, and to score that goal shows you that Lewandowski, who knows what his injury is, but now he can rest because he's suspended in the Liga. He'll probably play on Thursday, I would guess, but because he's suspended the next 2 weeks in the Liga, Lewandowski is going to get a rest from a game that he knew what the stakes were, and he played through whatever bit of pain. Third goal comes, Gabi wins the ball and stays onside for the return ball back to him. He gets the deflection on the cross, and Pedri finishes at the back post. And what I want to point out about Gabi, that was so incredible tonight, both assists, even if he didn't get credit for the second one, and the goal, they all came from his non-dominant left foot. And you look at the way that he played left wing last season, where he looked lost, and Kool-Aid didn't necessarily blame 17-year-old at the time, Gabi, because you put a 17-year-old on the left wing where he is a center midfielder. Didn't really help out Xavi's case, but Xavi trusted in the player. Obviously, Koeman and Xavi both saw what they had on their hands with him. But this season, now in that same position against Real Madrid, at the left wing, you see his positional sense, his awareness, the way he's adapted. That's what's going to make him a superstar for a long time. Gabi is still, at 18, a sponge. Whatever he can take in and however he can improve his game, just like Pedri, the sky is still the limit. So we see these players, that being Pedri and Gabi, who are the 2 best players on the field for me tonight against Real Madrid, boss El Clasico in a Spanish Super Cup for Xavi's first trophy. Of course, that makes you really excited for the year 2027. But what I'm excited for, and this is maybe just the Kool-Aid in me or the guy who has to watch every minute of every game, I'm excited for these little steps to watch Gabi make those improvements where in a big game, I mean, it's not a credit to Ansu or Ferran Torres or other players who should be on the left wing, but for Xavi to say, even though I trust Busquets and De Jong and Pedri, that's how we want to build up this team in the midfield against Real Madrid, I have to have Gabi in this game because Gabi was essential in this game. He was the man of the match, clearly. And for him to show out in such a big of a stage, as I said, for Kool-Aids, because Barcelona are not in the Champions League, Pedri and Gabi, it's going to be difficult to explain to other people why maybe they're better than Musiala, or maybe they're better than Bellingham, maybe they're better than Camavinga, or Tchouameni, or all these other midfield superstars for the future. But Gabi, boy, yeah, it's his world, and we're all living in it. Headline 4 is midfield control. Let's not stray too far because Barcelona's midfield were superior than Real Madrid. And if you do want to call it Xavi ball, you can't call the formation necessarily Xavi ball or say it's too dogmatic as to what Barcelona are doing at that box midfield. But what you can say is because Barcelona dominated the midfield, they dominated the game. And that is the Barcelona way. On the inverse, I haven't talked too much about Real Madrid because they were poor. And Real Madrid certainly took themselves out of the game with a bit of poor passing and way too many fouls early on that I think took away whatever rhythm Real Madrid wanted to have in the contest. With Vini Jr. not getting the calls against Araujo, I think that kind of threw everybody off a little bit. And then Modric, Kroos, and Camavinga never found the game. There are moments to praise Busquets, and a game like this doesn't change where his future lies. Should he renew at Barcelona? Still probably not. Barcelona need to move on from him. But this is the kind of game that reminds you that this season, as long as Sergio Busquets sticks around, he still has something to offer the club of his boyhood, the club of his dreams, the club of all those things where he is the captain of FC Barcelona. And there was a moment in particular in the first half when Araujo got caught a little bit upfield, had to switch over to the fullback. So that left Koundé and Busquets having to deal with Vini Jr., who was looking to cut inside, and those two, that being Koundé and Busquets, held up Vini Jr., took the ball off him, and the inverse of that, in possession, there was a moment in the second half. It didn't lead to much because Lewandowski couldn't truly track it down and get it off Militao, but Busquets with one touch delivers this huge long ball forward to Lewandowski, like 45, 50 yards on, again, just one touch, seeing the play as it's transpiring before it ever happens, showing you that on both ends, there is still something for Busquets to give. Is he the starter over De Jong in a midfield trio of a 4-3-3? No. But again, what can Busquets still give you? Showing you quite a lot. And De Jong as well, against Real Betis, didn't really show his best. Against Atletico Madrid, he was better. But in this one, De Jong was just as good as anybody on the other side of the field. And you could argue that his support of Pedri and Gabi and Busquets allowed them to do their jobs. His work rate tonight goes off that idea that I always want De Jong and Busquets when they play together to stay close. And he did. De Jong played vertically, he played horizontally. But even horizontally, he was very disciplined. because he didn't go forward too much vertically. I guess I could say he was vertically disciplined. He allowed Pedri and Gavi to shine, and he covered for them as well. Pedri didn't really have to drop in and defend and pick the ball up deep like we usually expect him to do. De Jong did that job for Pedri, and Pedri was allowed to just kind of be Pedri. Pedri and Gavi probably the two best on the field tonight. And if you want to sum up this whole game in 1 minute, I take you to the 76th minute, where Pedri and Gavi and De Jong, Busquets, right before De Jong came off the field, Dembélé helping out as well, Barcelona just wore Real Madrid down. That was the moment in the contest when you knew that Real Madrid had no chance. They were chasing shadows, the ball was doing all the work, and there was no hope, there was no way back for Real Madrid. That minute, to me, summed up the entire game for that midfield. And headline 5 is a question. Is this the win that Xavi needed? Of course, we'll have to extrapolate some big picture ideas. We'll do a lot of that on the podcast as well. But in a victory in the Spanish Super Cup to get a trophy, we already talked about that. I do wonder how important this can be for Barca's season moving forward. Manchester United in the Europa League is going to be a really tough tie. The Copa del Rey is not a guarantee, and Barcelona are 3 points up in the Liga. But this match, at least, made you feel like, unlike the Champions League, that Barcelona are capable of doing big things in big matches, of which throughout the rest of the season, as they look to get the La Liga and the Copa del Rey and the Europa League. Remember, there are 3 trophies still up for grabs, that Barcelona, at least in some of those matches, at least in some of those competitions, will deliver something. Because I think we often look so much about the issues that Barcelona has that make them a flawed team. And because Madrid won the Liga and the Champions League last year and beat Barca earlier this year, we rarely look at the issues that Barca's opponents may be having. Because Barca obviously have a long-term fullback problem that we've talked about time and time again. But tonight, Balde and Araujo were as close to perfect as you could possibly get. That 51st minute touch off that Ter Stegen diagonal ball and then the drive forward past Danny Hall from Balde, I mean, that's more than what you expect to see from him in a big moment, in a big game. It's why I wonder why he didn't start against Real Betis, and there was a little bit of hubris, I guess, for Xavi to try that Alba then Alonso thing. It almost came back to bite him, but Balde deserved to start. He's the best left back that Barcelona has, and he's certainly not only the one for the future, but he's one for the present too. But if we focus on Madrid again, just like Barcelona's fullbacks, Barcelona are broke. They have huge issues. Real Madrid are flush with cash, and they also have fullback issues. Ferland Mendy was fine in this game, but he's been suspect this season and not who his reputation tells you he is. And Danny Carvajal in this game was awful. He was the worst player on the pitch. Plus, for all the worries of the young players and Ansu and Torres, it was Camavinga who was taken off at halftime for the second straight game. It was a yellow card against Valencia, and he was just poor today against Barcelona, and a teenager getting yanked. Those are always worrying signs for a fan base. And while Culés this season have complained about Marcos Alonso and Eric Garcia and Ferran Torres, look at the 11 that was selected in this game. And even look at the subs that came on. How Xavi closed out this match. When this team is fully healthy, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit of this. I kept trying to tell everybody, the Champions League might have gone different with Araujo and Koundé at 100%. Really, it would have gone differently, those games. I can almost guarantee that. And you see the team that Xavi wanted to put together, especially when it's all healthy. His 11 went deep into this game, and then we saw Kessié, Ansu Fati, Eric Garcia, who's been in transfer rumors this week, Rafinha, and Roberto. And while those subs gave up a goal, Kessié lunging in and missing the tackle and Roberto not stepping to Benzema, the game was already way over by that time. And going back to one of his initial ideas and why I do have hope from this match throughout the rest of this season, is that tactically, as dogmatic as it seems that Xavi is at times, this is not the 11, I would say, or even the formation that Xavi will take to the Copa del Rey midweek, or even against Getafe on the weekend. Xavi's been willing to adapt his formation, and while he does have a pretty limited squad, and the depth does drop off pretty quickly as far as who Xavi can trust, this is a team that if they can adapt, and if they can figure out different opponents in different situations, the sky really is the limit. And I reiterate again that that's 3 straight games where Xavi chose his 11s and got his tactics right against Atletico Madrid, Real Betis, and Real Madrid. For those of us, myself included, who just said that Barca isn't as good as they were last January, this string of results against those 3 teams is a fair argument for the contrary. And while we never know what goes on psychologically for a team, but this is a team, clearly today, that played for Xavi, fought for the manager, and knew what a trophy would mean, and that is huge for their confidence. We always say that belief is a big difference between Real Madrid, that hubris they have in the Champions League to win trophies, and Barcelona, who seem to have some fragility when they're put on the back foot. But this game was also pretty contrary to that belief. It is the Spanish Super Cup, and the way that Real Madrid were kind of walking against Valencia and kind of treating this match as if it wasn't their highest priority, which it shouldn't be when there's Champions League and the Liga and all those things left to play. But yet Barcelona went out in El Clasico in the Spanish Super Cup for a trophy that Xavi really desperately needed. They were the team that needed this victory, and they're the ones that got it. As you're watching this, there's a slight chance that I'm currently recording the podcast, so subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. And as always, until next time, Forza Barça. But actually, most importantly this time, Campeones. Think back to last season when Xavi got some really important points against Sevilla. And think back even 2 years ago when Ronald Koeman needed to get some points against Sevilla to save his job and give Barcelona any hopes of even winning trophies that season. Those games against Sevilla, as has been the case for the last 20 or so years, have always been a big deal. Unfortunately, against today's Sevilla, it may not feel like as big of a deal, but hey, it's still one of the giants or historical giants of Spanish football. So let's have a little bit of fun with this one. It's the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 3-0 win over Sevilla. One is 8 points clear. I think it's the most important thing to take away, and I think the biggest deal from the day. After Real Madrid had dropped the 1-0 loss to Mallorca earlier in the day, there was a moment for Barcelona to seize the opportunity. And I think that Barcelona over the last 2 or 3 seasons really have been unable to seize the opportunity when it's come for them, especially in the Liga of late. But if Barca were going to do it against any other team, and I know I said this today's Sevilla isn't the one of the past, well, even in the past, Sevilla has struggled to beat Barcelona at the Camp Nou, and Barca should have used history to take care of business at home. Barca had not lost any of their last 14 games against Sevilla in the Liga. They had won 10 and drew 4, last falling in a 2-1 defeat in October of 2015, keeping 5 clean sheets in their last 7 against them in the Liga as well. So you can now make that 15 games and 6 clean sheets in 8. And by the way, for the Xavi out crowd, to tell you how well he's done in the start of his Barcelona career, at least in Spain. Again, you can still cry from the Champions League mountains, that's fine. But as far as what he's doing in Spain, well, Xavi has now earned 109 points in 46 La Liga matches, a plus 61. Guardiola was also 109, but a plus 89 for him. Luis Enrique was the best of the bunch with 112 points and a plus 95. And now that they have an 8-point lead, history has favored Barcelona, at least in the past. I'm not putting any jinx on it, of course. I'm just telling you the way it's always gone. And that's Barcelona, as we talk about in the Champions League, they don't win it unless they're the best team in the competition. And the same kind of goes for the Liga too. Barcelona has never wasted an 8-point advantage in the Liga. And that is a disadvantage that Real Madrid has never overcome. The only time that any team has overcome such an advantage, Madrid in 2003-04 lost an 8-point advantage from match day 20 on to Valencia. And it does make me feel sad for the Valencian fans and making me think of, well, just like during the Guardiola years and beyond, you never really know when you're in the glory days when they're happening either. I know that's not the phrase, but let's move on. 2 is one-way traffic. It was kind of like what I said about the Valencia fans. The same goes to Sevilla fans. It's a tough time for them, at least this season. Who knows with the talent they've seen walk out their doors, how they're ever going to get back to notoriety, because the Sevilla I know, or at least the one that I'm remembering and comfortable with, would not have been sitting in a medium to low block like this against Barcelona from the jump. But this is the Sevilla side that is fighting against relegation, and they're on the road, so they knew that just a point could help them in that fight. To Sevilla's credit, though, I don't see how Cadiz, Getafe, or Elche gets more points than Espanyol, Sevilla, and Valencia, the 3 teams right above them right now in the relegation fight, but crazier things have happened. On 9 points, Elche will be eliminated by the middle of March at this rate, so that just leaves those 2 other spots. And for the Liga as a whole, it's not even just those 6. Just by viewing experience, it's more about just the top 10 who kind of give you some pretty good matches, and they're all at 28 points or more, and the bottom 10 who are all 24 points or under, and, well, there have been some tough matches to sit through for those. As far as the one-way traffic of this game is summed up in about a 20-minute stretch there where Barcelona, in the first half, had 90-10 possession. So there is suffocating, and there is getting out and having a little bit of space against the break, but Sevilla had no shot in this game, and they were also conceding things to Barcelona that maybe Barca didn't even deserve. In particular, after Busquets had gone out, we'll get to that in a second, De Jong was kind of doing whatever he wanted. He was dropping in deeper, sure, and Sevilla were dealing with that, but Sevilla's press had no effect. De Jong was taking the ball off them as much as he was kind of building up from the back, and they seemed to have no hope. The minute they were able to turn Barca over or the attack falls flat for Barca, Sevilla had no hope of even getting out of their own half. And that is a testament, it must be said too, to that back line. There was a free header for Araujo. There was another moment where Sevilla just didn't look like themselves, not defending at all, and Araujo probably could have scored there, but I don't know. He was pretty far out, distance. Maybe Bono, who was Sevilla's best player in this game, unfortunately, could have got to it. And even Pedri in the midfield, it felt like, yes, him dropping deep was a whole thing that was going to change his day, but he created 6 chances, his personal best on the season. So even from a deeper position, Pedri was still punishing Sevilla today. But as far as Barcelona and that back line, the 0-0 is where they get their compliments, and why I begin to once again compliment the 0 as much as I compliment the 3, because we'll talk about the 3 goals in a second. Sevilla only had 1 shot on target in this game, and Ter Stegen handled the header save just fine. 20 matches, 15 clean sheets, and just 7 goals conceded. And as I talked about last week with Araujo's passing, that was a big focus of discussion last week.
If Araujo, Christensen, and Koundé are all healthy and playing, it's hard for any team to break through that. They are press resistant, they can all dribble out of trouble, and all three have the speed to track back. There is a bit of room for error when your teammates are so good, and that's why you're seeing so many clean sheets. Ter Stegen also saved this backline for the first 3 months of the year, and now that they're all healthy, they're all returning the favor. And how historic has this defense been for Barcelona? Well, they are the first team in the Liga history, that being La Liga history, dating back to 1929, to register 14 clean sheets in their first 20 matches of the season. That is defensive history. 3 is Kessi's fit. As I had said, Sevilla from the very jump, we're not sure how this match would have played out, but I am assuming that due to the fact that they were playing that medium and low block, that 4 square midfield, I am simplifying it. We're going to talk about it in the podcast with a special guest who people have already guessed. But yes, that's tomorrow. We're going to get into that and those tactics about those 4 midfielders that will change. And now that conversation is changing. But either way, Sevilla were always going to play in a lower medium block. And when Kessie came on, that didn't change what Barcelona wanted to do, but it did. It did change Barcelona's system, their tactics, and how they were going to attack that medium and low block. Unfortunately, with Busquets, just to get that over with, while the replays didn't look like it was too bad, maybe it's at his age, or obviously we don't know how bad it really was, but early reports are that he will be missing about 2 weeks or so, meaning the first leg for Manchester United is likely to be a no-go. So that means no Dembele, and now that Barcelona's going back to European competition, of course, Xavi's Gala 11 is now having names taken off the team sheet, with Dembele and Busquets on the sideline for that, leaving 9 other players that he would regularly pick for that kind of game. But focusing back to the Sevilla game, with Kessie coming on, it was almost questionable that if Xavi's going to move to pretty much a 4-3-3 like he did, that you would probably want to put a left winger like a Ferran Torres or an Ansu Fati on instead of Kessie, because that moves around the pieces quite a bit, and that forced Gavi to be a left winger. Just move him out to the left wing, and I've got compliments on that later. It works out for Barcelona, yes. But the Kessie part of this is what in the first half didn't really look like it was working out. When he's not making runs against that low block and trying to get into the box behind that back line, there's not much that he does to help Barcelona in build-up or dribbling or attacking into space or combining with teammates. That stuff just, maybe it won't be there, but at least it's not there now. I'm going to be patient, but it doesn't help you win today. Barcelona were also getting a little clogged with Kessie there, and it also, as we talked about with that midfield setup, it took De Jong farther back, so he wasn't able to dribble into space the way that Busquets allows him to do. And Pedri also had to come in to drop in deeper to collect the ball and to build up. So that meant that Kessie had a lot of work to do moving forward and making those runs, because unlike De Jong and Pedri, he's not putting any pressure on the back line with his ability to either dribble or to pass, something that Pedri and De Jong can both do to uncork those low blocks and those medium blocks, again, especially with Busquets supporting them and Gavi also moving horizontally to add that extra body. With Kessie, things become a bit more stagnant because he does limit what Barcelona can do, because not only is he not comfortable with his teammates, I think still just yet, but he is a different kind of midfielder. And if Xavi is going to be, and he kind of has to be, to get the best out of Gavi, Pedri, De Jong, and Busquets, has to be a little dogmatic with the way that those 4 positions are played. Again, we'll talk about it more on the podcast tomorrow. But because Kessie doesn't fit in any of those individual boxes per se with the other 3, it's an odd fit. And not to say some of that blame comes off of Kessie. It is his job to get accustomed and figure out where he belongs in this Barcelona team. But I do take some of that off him a little bit. That very much, as I've said a million times about Griezmann, if you try to fit a round circle into a square peg, it's not going to fit and it's never going to work. I don't think Kessie is that kind of situation like Coutinho and Griezmann said they were, trying to play with Messi. It's not that bad. That was just never going to work. But Kessie is going to need a little bit of time to figure out which even of those 4 roles suits him best. It seems like it's one of those too high interiors, but because he doesn't have an ability to retain the ball at a high level like Pedri, he doesn't have the motor per se horizontally or the versatility to be out on the wing and come inside like Gavi. That means that space-wise, his teammates kind of have to figure him out as much as he's trying to figure out where he needs to be. And as I said, that's going to take a little bit of time. And immediately, for all those who've been out on Kessie, for all those who say he should have been sold in January, well, they got an instant answer and they were unvindicated. I know it's not a word, or devindicated, whatever you want to call it, by the assist that Kessie provided. 2 things can be true all at the same time, and Kessie was big when he needed to be. Wonderful hold up to flick it on to Alba for that first goal to unlock Sevilla. Rafinha also doing a great job setting him up. We'll get to him in a second. Alba, a fine finish as well. And maybe those goals last year don't go in, but Alba's shot hopped right over Bono's leg, finds the back of the net, meaning Barcelona are up a goal at the Camp Nou. They were finally able to open up that low block. And funny enough for Alba, he was just 1 day shy of a full year since he last scored at the Camp Nou. Interestingly enough for Kessie, by the way, too, 3 assists now in his last 150 minutes of play for Barcelona. That means it's an assist every 50 minutes on average, and that's not counting his goals. So very much like we're going to get to with Rafinha, and it's the same still with Ansu Fati, believe it or not, the goal and assist rate for all the players that Kool-Aids are criticizing is still higher than league averages. That's just how good the league leaders at Barcelona have been. And so when the guys who are performing and winning in the Liga are doing their job, there are going to be guys in the secondary that do get criticism because they're not helping the effort, or you're scared about depth, and an injury to Busquets does make your Europa League chances kind of put those in doubt. So I understand why the criticism comes to that next batch of players. We see Dembélé and Busquets go down, and that means that Rafinha and Kessie are going to have a huge month upcoming. 4 is Gabi's earned goal. Like Lewandowski in the first half of the year, I feel like I could talk about Pedri or Gabi every time. So thankfully, Gabi got a goal, so I get to talk about him and get to say good things. With Kessie coming on, that could have put Gabi in an uncomfortable position, but even though he was spit out farther to the left wing, it was helpful to have Alba there. I think that guided Gabi along. As I had said before, he has improved his awareness and his understanding of playing on that left wing more so than last year. It's one of the improvements that we've seen in his game, and thankfully for Xavi, just because Kessie came on the field did not change anything that Gabi was doing. His work rate was the same. His job, his role was as similar as it could be, with the exception of making a little more space for Kessie in the middle of the field, and then he would cut horizontally in a little bit less, also occupying that half space between the right back and the right center back a little less. But that didn't affect how Gabi was impacting this game. I think his crossing is probably even getting better. It's been at least good in the last month. And Gabi's also been a lot more emboldened to crash into the box, and he's rewarded for a goal today for that. I guess the only unfortunate thing is that Gabi's goal did kind of ruin some history. Barcelona were looking for their 5th consecutive 1-goal win in the Liga history. 4 straight was already history, but I always like them to make a little bit more. But I'm also much, much happier to win by 2 goals or more in any Barcelona game at all. And headline 5 is more Rafinha. He either had the pre-assist, the assist, or a goal in this one. A fantastic day, a man-of-the-match performance for a guy that people were saying was absent in the first half. But it is a little bit of a conundrum where you watch a whole game and you go, when is Dembélé going to break this all open? And for Rafinha, it's not when he's going to break it all open. It's when are you going to have him finish something, or when is that moment going to come when he does that final thing that winds up creating a goal contribution. He has more goal contributions, which is 3 goals and 4 assists, than anybody else in the Liga. I know it's just been 1 month, but that means that a player who's out of form seems to be in form, at least in the Liga. And I know he scored the goal, but if you think of Rafinha as an assist giver, as an inverted winger, then it makes a lot of sense as to what he is and what he provides to Barcelona. When wingers tend to invert, the idea is that he's a goal scorer. I completely understand that. That's how the idea was for Coutinho when he was put on the left wing. That's how Alex Sanchez was as well. You think those inverted wingers are supposed to be goal scorers, and he was that at Leeds. But I think he was that at Leeds because he had to be. And I think we're seeing Rafinha much more naturally, almost like the way he plays for Brazil, that if you think of him as an assist giver, as an inverted winger, we talked about before how that doesn't entirely make sense in Xavi's system. But he is still finding a way to have actual output. His 8 assists is now more than Dembélé's 7 in the Liga in a lot less minutes. And the goal caps all that off. The assist, that helps his confidence. The pre-assist for the first goal is also a pretty good piece of skill. That helps his confidence. But the goal at home, the applause him and Alba got as they were coming off the field, those things do wonders for a man's confidence. And as we've said many, many times throughout, and it should be the theme here from this game, Rafinha and Kessie, those two coming up big, honestly, I think you put more responsibility on those two to decide the next month and maybe even those Manchester United matches than anybody else. Because you do kind of figure out what you're going to expect and what I think we've grown to now expect from De Jong and Pedri and Gabi, and what you should expect from Lewandowski and what you expect from that back line and Balde. So what are Kessie and what are Rafinha going to give you? Those are the big questions that we're going to be answering all month long. But before that, tomorrow, we've got a lot to talk about Barcelona's midfield. Again, that conversation has completely changed with Busquets' injury, but I think there's still a lot of good stuff to talk about, as well as what Xavi's ideas are for the remainder of this season and the next month to come.
Our second of 3 El Clasicos in a month, and I can tell you with this one, it's over. La Liga, it's over. And that feels pretty good to say, because how many El Clasicos of late have Kool-Aids been able to say that with? 12 points at this point. Yes, I know, mathematically it's possible. We should all be all doom and gloom, but I don't believe in any jinxes like that. 12 points is way too much for Real Madrid to come back from. And this was a pretty fitting way for Barcelona to win their 100th El Clasico in their history. Yes, both sides had plenty of excuses. There was no Pedri, no Dembélé, no David Alaba on the other side. But while both teams did have their excuses, on the field at least, I didn't see any excuses taking place. That's all stuff we're going to talk about. And thankfully, unlike the Copa del Rey first leg game where Barcelona gave up so much of the possession at the Santiago Bernabeu, I don't feel like I'm going to have to make many excuses for Barcelona either after the performance they put in at the Spotify Camp Nou. So let's do it. Here are the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 2-1 victory over Real Madrid. Well, actually, before we do that, it'd be a big help if you could subscribe to the channel, maybe even give this video a like, and maybe even a share. This is just the kind of match that I'm hoping gets Culés who may have checked out after Europe back into the fold and back excited about the team. And we're sitting through that little PSA there. I hope you've subscribed. There's your other chance there. Well, now it's time to get really into it, the 5 headlines from Barcelona's win over Real Madrid. One is El Clasico standards. There was a time, I'm old enough to remember, when both of these teams sat atop the world, and El Clasico truly felt like a toss-up of the 2 great giants in the world. There did feel like a time when everything was even, when there were stars, star managers, and every game felt like it was going to lead to another team taking a trophy from the other. And while both these teams were dominating the rest of the world, the only team they seemed to be unable to dominate was each other. But then, of course, Culés sat through, and you've seen it for the match reviews that I've been doing for the last few years, when Barcelona have felt like they were a step behind Real Madrid in all aspects of the games, in trophies, even in the boardroom. It just felt like Barcelona were lacking. But for this game, even though there are mixed reports, of course, podcast host Levon was saying that he felt like it was one of the more quieter pregame atmospheres that he'd ever seen, and yet there are others that saying that there was fanfare like they had never seen before in Catalonia. Yet regardless of the pre-game atmosphere, no mosaic as well for the first time in 31 years, which does feel a bit odd. But once that opening whistle blew, it did feel like both these teams were willing to completely get up for a game that really mattered to both sides. Within the first 3 minutes of action, both the number 9s put a shot on target. And I think that's all we needed for this game to go off to the races and fit what I'd like to say has been lacking recently, and that is El Clasico standards for El Clasico. I do think being at home mattered for Barca, and maybe that early Benzema chance woke Barca up, because instead of ruining the chances that Barca didn't finish, we get to look at them with that glass half full and consider just how many times Barca troubled Courtois. There was the early Lewandowski chance, Roberto's high shot, Christensen's header, Christensen's back heel, Rafinha's long shot, Rafinha's second half-bouncing chance in the second half, and Lewandowski also had a run in behind in the second that really could have ended with a little bit of luck in a goal. And headline 2, speaking of luck, is almost unlucky. This is one of those matches in the 9th minute when Barca go down, and you could have felt like, even in the Spotify Camp Nou with all those fans cheering for any bit of luck that they could squeeze out of this team and Xavi's side, it may not have been their day. Because that first goal is a ton of luck for Real Madrid, which makes those Carlo Ancelotti comments, you can check those out, pretty puzzling in the post-game, where he felt like they deserved to win. Well, I don't know about this own goal here. A little bit of luck, but maybe a little bit of an error on Barcelona's side as well. Roberto, Busquets, and Araujo maybe got their wires crossed, but Busquets kept up with Vini Jr., I thought, rather well. If Araujo doesn't head it, Ter Stegen may have a play on it, and maybe Benzema doesn't finish that. Roberto probably should have shifted over when Vini Jr. came behind, but I don't know if he stops that cross from getting off either and slides fast enough to deal with Vini Jr., who had already turned his hips to get towards the goal line in a way that Roberto would have had to go over his left shoulder and turn his hips that way. I don't think he catches him at all, and I think that happens either way. And not to underplay that goal at all, but it was also Barcelona's first open play goal conceded at home this season. We're all the way in March, and the season started in August. And that really is the reason. More than this 90 minutes or 100 minutes, whatever, 99 minutes or whatever. Their defensive record, especially at home against all Liga competition, is why Barcelona were leading the Liga going into this match and why they most likely will win the title. Again, that's why 12 points is not about Real Madrid. It's actually about Barcelona this time around, which again feels pretty good to say. There are also moments where I think both teams had some shouts for things happening their way, like that questionable Nacho tackle on Rafinha near the end of the first half. Don't forget about that one. And to credit Madrid, they did make their own luck too. I thought Vini Jr. got the better of Araujo more than their other meetings combined, which again is not necessarily an insult to Araujo, but Vini Jr. did feel pretty up to this match when the opening whistle blew. Yet, I also will say that Araujo hurt him down the right too, with Araujo getting forward and forcing Vini Jr. to do something he doesn't do, which is defend. They both ended the game with 2 successful dribbles, so, I guess, I don't know, you tell me who won that one. And then Koundé, who got 1 foot wrong all night, but it almost led to a goal in the second half, and certainly could have changed the way we talked about him in this game. And then Gavi, too, probably should have gotten a yellow in the second half when he pulled down a Madrid player behind the play. And all those things are just so you know what Madridistas will probably be talking about after this match. So there are moments where Barcelona were culpable, but they were also able to survive it. And none greater than the Asensio offside goal, of course. A complete breakdown on the left side for Barcelona, and they were just too late in tracking back on that side. Barca were pressing hard. Kessie was going forward probably a bit too much because of how gassed Rafinha was, and there was a miscommunication there. It's tough too because you know that Kessie was given these instructions: get forward, press hard, and do that work right before Rafinha was going to come out for Ferran Torres. But before that sub was made, maybe Xavi should have subbed them off at the same time. But before that sub was made, that right side breaks down because Kessie is too forward and Madrid too easily broke through that press. Then Araujo tried to pinch on the sideline, and that brought Rodrigo coming inside, and eventually the ball gets to Asensio, and he finishes it well, but his shoulder, just the shoulder, I mean, you can see it. The line, straight line, the shoulder is offsides. Again, that call, that image is going to be seen everywhere and debated across all of Spanish television for the next week, certainly. 3 is only in El Clasico. I wanted to get those Real Madrid goals out of the way because I really do think it is time to talk about the man of the match, Sergi Roberto. I'm not sure if he's my man of the match. That might be Frankie de Jong. You'll have to listen to the podcast about that one. But yeah, at least for Sergi Roberto, he was given to it by pretty much every other outlet for that goal that he scored. The goal that defined this game happened in the 45th minute. Oh wait, there was another goal that happened in even farther stoppage time at the end of a half. But yeah, Sergi Roberto got the man of the match. And I want to talk about the build-up too here. Koundé did really well against Benzema, and that was a running theme all night long. But that was one time where he brought the ball up himself on that right side. Araujo tucked into cover. Again, it's the end of that first half, so I think Vinny Jr. was starting to get a bit of tired legs and didn't want to go forward with Araujo anymore, so Koundé was able to step into that space with the ball, and then Barca kept possession in Madrid's half. That's what you do when the legs of the opposition get tired. Even though Madrid had their chances and they had a 1-0 lead, Barcelona still had plenty of possession and plenty of control and opportunities in that half, and so they were still on the front foot at that moment. Gabi finds Lewandowski in behind after the ball was switched to the left, and then Rafinha whiffs on the first look, but things work out for Barcelona, a little bit of luck. Araujo puts the cross back in, Rafinha's shot was blocked, falls right to Sergio Roberto. Who else? Of course, Sergio Roberto controls it and scores it confidently, his first El Clasico goal in 30-plus chances. And everyone said it too. With the exception of Roberto in for Kessie, the starting lineup was perfect. And you know what? When the game ended, I mean, maybe they were still right about that. But Roberto getting this goal, it's this weird thing. I don't find him at this point, of course, because I deal with every match. I deal with the wage structure. I deal with the last 5 years. So you can't get me on that romance of Sergio Roberto thing. I went on that podcast, The Ripple Effect, to talk about his goal against PSG just 2 weeks ago. And this is another one of those moments. I turned to the people I was watching the game with, and I said, who else? Of course, it's Sergio Roberto coming up in a moment right after he renewed again for another season. You can't get him out of his life because he's a captain and he scores goals like this. And that is all he really does for FC Barcelona. But you know what? They're going to take home the Liga trophy, and you're going to remember this goal. 4 is Barca to lose. Regardless of what Madrid and Ancelotti want to say after this match, unlike the Copa del Rey first leg, where that was Real Madrid's match to lose, I mean, somehow they didn't get a shot on goal. We know that. Of course, I said that. But still, Real Madrid should have been the team on the front foot in that game. But Barcelona at home were the team on the front foot in this match. And once that 1-1 happened, even though the second half was back and forth, the offside goal happened, it still did feel like Barca's game to lose, like so many other matches so far in the Liga this season. And that doesn't mean that Barcelona didn't play with fire, though. They were playing with fire around the 48th to 56th minute, somewhere around there, with Madrid having possession for large bouts of time in Barcelona's half of the field. Fortunately, in other previous seasons and other versions of El Clasico, Barcelona did have an answer. I thought they countered really well with some pressure of their own right after the sustained pressure from Madrid. And you could tell how much Lewandowski wanted a goal in this match and how he knew that it was there for him for the taking. He didn't get one, but I was much more inspired by Lewandowski's performance today than maybe I've been, with exception of 1 or 2 other games, since the World Cup break. I thought that's how much Lewandowski was important and significant in this match to take away the attention of Militao and Rudiger enough for other players to do what they have to do. Again, for the tactics about this game, that's going to be on the podcast, which will be out in a few hours. It's just going to be me flying solo, but if you want that extra stuff, go to wherever you find your podcast. I talk about all the tactics of this match in that version of it. Well, what is this discussion of the match? And while people will go on Lewandowski for missing that side volley at the back post in the second half, again, that moment winds up not mattering because of how the game ends. And even then, I don't know. I don't think it was as easy of a chance as people were saying. On the other side of the field, speaking of Barca to lose, the Araujo-Vini Jr. matchup was the one that everybody talked about beforehand. I think everyone will be talking about this week. And I know only Culés will really be talking about Christensen. I think this is the match, and this is the week, I should say, because of the international break, where I would hope the world, after having watched this match, begins to talk about just how important Christensen has been. Now, I don't watch enough of everybody else to tell you who the most important signings have been, but a free transfer signing, yeah, I know Kessie was a free transfer signing as well when he scored the winning goal, but a free transfer signing that winds up helping you win the Liga by potentially 10 points or more. So that means that a team who's going to win one of the major domestic league titles signed a free agent, and he was an essential part in winning that title. That is definitely one of the best signings that any team made this offseason. That is Andres Christensen. For the second straight Clasico, and I am talking about that first leg Copa del Rey match, Christensen held Benzema to be largely ineffective throughout the entire match. He's a reigning Ballon d'Or winner, and you barely heard a sniff out of him. Yes, he was combining play, but as far as when he was in Barcelona's box, Christensen or Koundé handed him off perfectly. It was very much like the communication I spoke about in that first leg of the Copa del Rey. I thought Barcelona's backline were magnificent dealing with Benzema. And his huge block, that being Christensen's, in the 86th minute, that's what felt like at least a draw had been secured at that point. And right in front of them, Busquets and De Jong as well did their jobs better than Kroos and Modric did. And as I've said 1,000 times, when Barcelona win the midfield battle, they have the better chance to win the match. And we overuse terms like the Barca way to say things we can't explain, but having the better midfield and getting the better result is certainly somewhere in there. De Jong barely put a foot wrong. He had 100 touches in this match, 77 of 82 on his passes, 10 ball recoveries, won 8 of his 9 duels, committed 0 fouls, fouled twice, did not get dribbled past even a single time, and had 3 tackles more than anybody else in that match. Also 3 for 3, perfect on his dribbles. De Jong was sensational in this match, and okay, yeah, maybe I did kind of give it away here. De Jong's probably actually my man of the match. And 5 is King Kessie. Now let me read you the note that I had before Kessie scores that goal and after Ferran Torres and Kessie had come in the game and before Ansu Fati had come in. Even though Ferran Torres came on, Barca are basically winning the Liga with 15 players at the moment. You can sense it when Madrid made the 5 changes and they all added something different to the game, while Kessie and Torres just ran around while their tired teammates limped to the finish line. So that was a note that I wrote right before the game really busted open, and that was also right after the Asensio offside goal winds up not counting, but it felt like something had happened in that game, and so I wrote it down. Yeah, I'm glad there are times when there were notes that I should have deleted because I got it wrong, but, I did in the moment think that Xavi got it wrong. But it all works out for Kessie on the game-winning goal. Now, the game was wide open. Lewandowski's backheel pass, though, frees up Balde, and I had mentioned Lewandowski, as frustrating since the World Cup break it has been for him, I thought he was much better in this match, so much more significant. And again, it all started in basically, the 3rd or 4th minute when he unloads that long shot. Then Balde, of course, cuts it back to Kessie, who finishes with no doubt. And I think, to speak of Balde first, the pundits outside of Barcelona are starting to say it. If Balde gets better as his crossing and his final ball, he can be truly elite at the left back position, or actually across all positions. And what do I always say about fullbacks? It is almost impossible to be considered an elite fullback. Look at João Cancelo, just 12 months ago for Man City. Is he the best fullback in the world? Since that time, he's basically fallen out of favor at both Man City and Bayern Munich on loan. And so who are those elite fullbacks? Is it Zinchenko, who was a backup at Man City, here in the starting spot, goes to Arsenal, now we're talking about him? Not to say it's easy, but it's actually hard to be considered an elite fullback because it's hard to stay consistent at the level at that position because it's so essential in modern football. So for Balde, yeah, if he gets the crossing and final ball, as I just said, it seems just as easy to fall back down the stairs as it does to go up them. So Balde can certainly get up those stairs in the next 1 or 2 years, depending on that final ball. But what I will say is that big moment for an elite cutback, right to the foot for Kessie for the goal, that is certainly a play that the world just watched that's going to be considered when you're talking about how good Balde is. And the last note about that goal, and actually the first one too, it is crazy to think that the 2 midfielders who scored the 2 goals for Barcelona in this game were those guys that would probably have not have started this game if Pedri was fit. So to sum it all up, Barcelona needed a win or a draw. That was necessary, but they got the win. They took care of business. And this might be an essential victory too. I know you say that Barcelona have to get over the hump in Europe, and I agree with that. Because in Europe, over the last few seasons, I was here too, every must-win game has ended in a loss. And I don't know how many times, I think that 4-0 for Barcelona last year over Real Madrid in El Clasico was maybe the last match that really truly felt must win, and Barcelona got a result in it. But even then, Real Madrid still wound up winning La Liga. That was about Barcelona being able to affirm their space in the top 4, and again, to take care of business for the rest of that season. But this one could have got him a trophy. And I know they don't get the trophy tomorrow. They still have to take care of business. And as I just contradicted myself, a lot of the other results over the course of a whole season are what set you up for success in the Liga more than just one El Clasico. But Real Madrid wind up winning the Liga sometimes on the back of El Clasico. And I feel like today, Barcelona did just that. This game was teetering on the edge. And as they've done all season in Spain, though, Barcelona still hung on. And that's why this could really be a monumental win. As for me, as I did warn on last week's podcast, I am heading out for a few days. So if you want more of this match, while I don't have a guest this week, there's going to be plenty of tactics talk coming out with these 5 headlines in audio format. So get that wherever you get your podcasts. And this week, while I will physically be away from this desk I'm sitting at now, I won't be away from your ears and your eyes because I do have something on Sergio Busquets that has already been well researched and already edited and all that stuff so that it's ready to go, as well as a former Barcelona goal scorer that does have a little story about El Clasico in it, and that is Kini. So we've got all that coming up through the international break, which, as I said, it's weird with momentum, this kind of breaking off, but I hope those good vibes can continue on through the international break, because I think this FC Barcelona team and Kool-Aids, for all the suffering they've done recently, have certainly earned it. So I may not always mean it completely, but I really truly mean it this time. As always, until next time, I'll see you soon, and Forza Barca. It's been 17 years since Atletico Madrid beat Barcelona at the Camp Nou. And that stat tells you that Diego Simeone has never done it. Yet, as they say, that's why they play the games. Because coming into this one, all the momentum was with Atletico Madrid and not with the team in Barcelona that had failed to score a single goal in 3 straight matches. Atleti had won 6 straight in the Liga, and they had not lost a game since January 8th against Barcelona, 1-0 nonetheless. But it was a 12-game unbeaten streak for Atletico Madrid, and they were the hottest team in Spain. So while it is totally fair that you're going to criticize the final result, whether it's Xavi or the players we'll get into, and I am going to criticize as fairly should be done. But the most important thing, and it's not even one of the headlines, because I think it's what defines this entire video, is that this 1-0 win for Barcelona could be the game, and should be the game, that has them holding the Liga trophy, and Kool-Aid should be able to take a much larger breath, while that being an exhale out, because it seems like they took care of business when they absolutely needed to, as they've done many times this season in the league. So let's do it. The 5 headlines from Barcelona's 1-0 win over Atletico Madrid in the Liga. 1 is Ferran Torres flowers. While I don't think he was the player of the game, let's give flowers to Ferran Torres for that goal. Because in a time where the other forwards on Barcelona weren't putting the game away and sealing the deal, Ferran Torres' 1 goal was the difference maker in this game. And while I praise Lewandowski in the fall, and I praise Rafinha when he did it, I praise Pedri when he did it, if you're the guy with the boot on the ball to put it in the back of the net and be the difference maker in 3 points, when the team is winning the Liga trophy at the end of the season, I'm going to think of you in that match, and I'm going to give you your credit. Now, it wasn't all Ferran Torres, because the other guy I want to give a lot of credit to on this goal is Araujo. And I do sometimes still criticize his decision-making on the ball, and the fact that when other teams of the elite variety decide to press him and leave him be the wide-open man that needs to beat the opposition with his feet, there are times when he can't do it at the elite level. But against a team, even Atletico Madrid, that I consider, with their run of form, elite, this is a really promising sign from Araujo. That ball, little 10-yard dink from Koundé, Araujo pops it right over the top for Rafinha to run onto. He still had a bit to do as well. Cut it back, lays it off for Ferran Torres, who finds himself very opportunistically in a tremendous amount of space. He took his time, kept it low, and put that past Oblak. And it wasn't Ferran Torres' only good moment in this game. Barcelona started the second half, I thought, rather well, with a better move in possession against that 5-3-2. Rafinha, inside slightly, poked it over to Ferran for the long shot. And this is a kind of game, interestingly enough, against that low block, where I did kind of wonder if Lewandowski was in better form. Sure, we'll get to him in a second. But between Rafinha and Ferran Torres, it kind of made sense with those two, both trying to come inside, overloading the middle of the field. Yes, they have to use their width, Balde on the left and Rafinha on the right, to stretch that 5 at the back, yes. But all that tight space work for Ferran Torres and Rafinha, they're both fully capable, I think, at times of doing that. And I think they both had rather positive games today because of such a skill. Which brings us to headline 2, which is a difficult time for Lewandowski. There are people that do deserve a bit of criticism in this game, and Lewandowski is number 1 of all. As I've said before, with Ferran Torres and Ansu Fati and Rafinha, and even Gabi and Koundé, throughout the course of an entire season, all the players, even the best players for Barcelona, have deserved criticism, because not every result has gone their way. And there are also times, and especially on the podcast, I find myself defending or sticking up for each and every player in this squad. I don't think with a single exception. And so with Lewandowski, I've defended him at times, and I even mentioned 2 weeks ago about that back injury, that it might be worse than we think it is. But there's also a limit to the excuse for the back injury because Xavi chose to play him 90 full minutes again. He never takes him off the field because structurally he is Barcelona's only center forward, and Xavi feels like his position, whether or not Lewandowski is fit enough to do it, should be on the field at all times. So if he's clearly fit to go 90, and De Jong, who still didn't have his legs after his injury, can only go 78, well again, then I have to say, we're going to give you criticism where it's deserved in Lewandowski. Because it was all out of sorts for him today. Whether it was way too many touches before he got himself into a position to shoot, both he and Gavi had an awful time receiving in tight space. And even Lewandowski's movement, I think, was frustrating to me. As I had said, it was a better start to Barcelona's second half because you finally saw multiple players running in behind, and not just Balde and Rafinha out wide, or an ambitious attempt at Lewandowski running into limited space in the left half space where the ball really never came. Finally, Barcelona were stretching out the opposition quite a bit, and they were making those hard runs in behind, and Lewandowski was prospering for that. But as I said, he didn't prosper at all in this game because he took way too many touches. And I think what is completely inexcusable is in the 76th minute, with Rafinha wide open. Now, maybe Lewandowski was offside and it didn't matter, but the fact that he took that shot on goal, didn't score it. Yeah, I mean, if he scored it, sure. But the fact that Rafinha was wide open on that centering pass, not all of Rafinha's histrionics are merited this season, but those and any frustration he has with Lewandowski certainly are. It was a selfish move, and it's what kept that game in the balance when it should not have been. But as you're kind of hearing, it's not just Lewandowski, and systemically, Atletico Madrid, of course, were going to make it difficult for Barcelona, and the reasons why they did that was playing in that 5-3-2. Barcelona were way too slow in the first half with their speed of the ball circulation. De Jong and Busquets being asked to do quite a bit, and a bit too much for Busquets in particular. Totally unnecessary yellow card for him 11 minutes into the second half, meaning he'll be missing the next match, which I think might actually be a good thing for him with a midweek game against Rayo, because I think a lot of the things that Atletico Madrid do, Rayo do to a very similar degree, maybe just a little bit less. And if Busquets was having trouble in this game with what Atletico Madrid was doing, logic would say that maybe it's good that you kind of get a different idea in there, especially with De Jong fit again. And speaking of De Jong, he was excellent in this game. I already mentioned that I think it might have been Araujo as the man of the match for me. I'm not sure about that. Again, another clean sheet for Barcelona. But for De Jong, I think it'd be fair if you gave it to him too. He was so essential to keeping possession, winning the ball back when he needed to. And I think actually giving Barcelona something to trust in, some kind of control and continuity. And De Jong, to see him come back as well as he did, is a really positive sign. But I think we're going to need another headline to talk about Ter Stegen. Because headline number 3 is Griezmann made Kool-Aid's sweat. Antoine Griezmann was probably actually the man of the match in this game. From the first minute, hitting that crossbar all the way to the 90th minute, it felt like if a goal came from Atletico Madrid boot, it was going to come from Antoine Griezmann. Just sensational from him in this match. And particularly that shot that had to be stopped by Ter Stegen going down to his right. Ter Stegen now, by the way, has equaled Claudio Bravo's clean sheet record of 23 games in a single Liga season. And he's going to wind up, regardless of all the Real Madrid goalkeepers and Barcelona goalkeepers of the past, I think that's going to be Marc-Andre Ter Stegen's record, of course, because there's just 9 games remaining, and I think that Barcelona are probably going to get at least one more clean sheet in that time. And this was clearly on purpose to get Antoine Griezmann in those spots. He usually does. I've been watching La Liga this season, and he finds those against some of the better left-footed center backs in the Liga. But against Marcos Alonso, that was clearly part of the game plan. For on the counter, Antoine Griezmann, just attack him. Go right at him, and even if he stands you up and you can't get past him, you created some space, create some kind of numerical overload on the left when Balde was upfield, and that means Alonso is in 2v1 situations or 1v1 situations with Griezmann, neither of which he could handle, and he picked up an early yellow, which fortunately for him, he didn't pick up a second. The weird thing about Griezmann, though, is that he has no goals in 13 games as a visiting player at the Camp Nou. Just a weird stat, a weird albatross, and I don't know if that got better or worse when he was already in their uniform and he's now out of it. And I guess I'm not totally being fair to all the Atleti players, because if it wasn't Griezmann, I think it would have been Yannick Carrasco, who, did it feel like a little bit of a tryout? Maybe. He looked dangerous for Atletico Madrid, sure. He did a number on Joel Koundé, but, where would you put him? Does he take the place of Balde on the right? Maybe he's a left winger? Is he fine with just being a rotation piece, the in theory backup to Balde? I'm not sure about any of those, and not knowing that answer makes me feel like 20 million euros is just a bit too much for Carrasco, even seeing the kind of performance he can put in. And the performance he had today was generally the one that he gives you game in and game out. It was much quieter from Griezmann in the second half until Ter Stegen had to save one again, and it was right on the doorstep from a feed from Morata, but fortunately, as I mentioned, Ter Stegen has been so important in the Liga, and I really got to think about it, especially in this match. It was a microcosm of everything. Lewandowski doesn't get a goal, but he did score all those goals that make him the man of the season in the Liga for Barcelona. I mean, the next thing we're going to get to is Pedri, and you see how much better they got with him on the field. And then Ter Stegen, of course, Barcelona do not get the 3 points without him in net tonight. Headline 4 is instant upgrades. You knew it was coming. 61st minute, here comes Pedri for Ferran Torres, and Eric Garcia comes on for Marcos Alonso. But it's that first one that I want to talk about because Eric Garcia, not too great in this one. Immediately gave it away after coming on, but Arrigo de Paul was wide after Carrasco beat Koundé again. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is with Eric Garcia and Marcos Alonso. You know how it is. Those two moves indicated for Xavi that 1, you want to get Marcos Alonso off with his yellow, but 2, that Barcelona wanted to have, and there was an indication for even more desire for control. And that immediate shot from Gavi that went wide was that indication. The minute Pedri came on the field, it felt like the left side and the right side were totally connected. It felt like Gavi had a lot more space to receive the ball. It felt like Gavi had more ambition to get forward and make himself dangerous in the box because he knew he had some support. It's crazy that Pedri, still, at the age he's at, makes such an impact that you take that breath, just like De Jong, the whole team just seems to take that breath and rely on the fact that they can say, hey, we've got just an iota of control in this game. We are up 1-0, and here comes Pedri to get and retain the ball out of those tight spaces. With Barcelona and Xavi, no matter what, Xavi might play a different way than Pep and Luis Enrique, and we've talked about those things, and we are going to talk about tactics and Barcelona's big picture stuff on Tuesday. That's why I'm going so hard on the tactics of the Atletico Madrid preview. But Pedri is what kind of does change your tactics even, because he allows you to have a control over a match that Barca has not had in the last 1 month and a half since Pedri went out. They went back to feeling like Barcelona when he came on the field. There was plenty of extra chances. And why we're criticizing the forwards at the end of this match? Because Pedri came on and Barcelona took that step forward and looked like the better team. Lewandowski started looking better, setting up Rafinha for a tap-in when the ball bounced up on him. And it was right before the Gavi missed chance as well that was right on the doorstep. Barcelona should have scored more goals, but that's a good thing to me, honestly. The fact that they're creating chances, that means that Xavi's got his system back because he's got his players back. The freedom that Pedri and De Jong have in this system cannot be replaced, because many who've been on my show, including the purists and others, have also mentioned many times the Xavi system does dictate that certain players rise to the occasion, that they have the freedom to positionally understand where they need to be and how they work together in those triangles. And the better the player, the more success you're going to have and the more opportunities you create. It seems obvious, but as we've seen in the last month, it's not always a given, and Pedri and De Jong are necessary. Headline 5 is Lamine Yamal on the bench. We did not see the 15-year-old today, and that's okay. I can't believe he even made the bench. As I mentioned, I thought he would have his preseason debut in some kind of low-level, third-tier or fourth-tier Catalan side in the preseason before they go on whatever big tour they're planning over the summertime. But just to have him on the bench is a clear indication. With his contract up in 2024, his agent as Jorge Mendes, you know that Barcelona is already trying to make sure that they keep this talent. And it is interesting over the last few seasons that Illas Comas and Lamine Yamal, they're 2 years apart. But as I mentioned on the last podcast, I went on a whole thing explaining why Illas Comas is probably going to Leeds United and the progress that he hasn't made. Clearly the club has seen Lamine Yamal, and they've seen enough to know that they want to lock him down for the long term and have him in their first team as soon as possible. And obviously it makes total sense that with 9 games remaining, he'll likely get his chance to make his debut, being the youngest debut in history for Barcelona. But to have him not in this match, again, that made all the sense in the world. You can actually blame Lewandowski and Rafinha and Gavi for having him not on the field because, again, this game, probably could have been 4-1 or 3-1 or 5-1 for Barcelona. But because the big dogs and the adults couldn't finish, well, adults, Gavi, you get the point. But because those guys couldn't finish, Lamine Yamal is going to have to wait for his debut, which, again, totally fair. And when I did hear that he would be the first 15-year-old debuting for Barcelona, that didn't sound right, and so I do want to throw out there that I was correct, but he is still the youngest, so that stat would be right, regardless of whether or not he debuts now, that being on Wednesday, or throughout the rest of this season, because he does not turn 16 until July. Armand Martinez Sagi was 15 years and 11 months when he debuted in 1922, 6 months younger than Paulinho Alcantara when he debuted in 1913. At 16 years and 9 months, we rounded out the top 4 with Vicente Martinez and Ansu Fati. And a wild stat of players 5 through 11 on the list, they either debuted in the 1920s or in the 21st century. That's a weird thing, but it tells you where the club has been at different parts in their history. that the academy has been bolstered and became what it did really in the 21st century. And then back in the 1920s, Barcelona were still on the up. They were still becoming a club, and they were looking for any kid in Catalonia who knew how to kick a ball at a good rate. Bojan, Gavi, Marc Iniesta, and Messi were the 21st century guys, by the way. On the other end of the spectrum, Lewandowski will end the season as the 15th oldest player in Barcelona's history, with multiple years left on his deal, so I'm just going to throw that stat in there as well. And those last two stats also a reminder, too, that Barcelona, as we've seen in previous seasons, like to live on the extremes, the youngest and the oldest, with almost nothing in between. Thankfully, Frankie de Jong and Araujo, Ter Stegen, those are age ranges, I'd say, that are right in the middle, prime of their careers, and those are the kind of guys that got the job done today, so I'm happy with it. 1-0 that should lock up La Liga. Still, some tests ahead. There's Real Betis, Real Sociedad, Rayo Vallecano on Wednesday, but I think Barcelona have not only gotten their confidence back, but more importantly, they've got Pedri and de Jong back. So I hope you join me for the rest of this season, as Barcelona should be raising that trophy before too long. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca.
Hey everybody, I know this one is coming out a bit later than I like to get these out after matches, but for a game like this, I didn't want to miss the opportunity, and I guess it's better late than never. Because I wasn't going to skip one where I finally, and I mean finally, get to talk about goals after what felt like way too long. So let's get into it. The 5 headlines from Barcelona's 4-0 win over Real Betis. Headline 1 is things clicking early. There is something for Barcelona, at least usually in recent seasons, about playing Real Betis, where especially at home, Barcelona seems to want to play a certain way, and Real Betis seem to want to let them play that way. Of course, it probably didn't hurt that Xavi got to basically have his Gala 11, Sans Dembélé, who returned from injury in the second half. And unfortunately, Betis have been and will be for the remainder of the season without Nabil Fekir. But they were also missing a number of important players and even starters along that back line. And that's when they began the game with 11v11. And I think all that added up to Barcelona being able to play the way that Xavi wanted them to play. We even saw from the opening jump Lewandowski getting involved in the match early and Betis giving him a lot of space to drop in on the left side, creating those numerical overloads with Balde and Gavi. And with the return of Busquets into the lineup, that also meant that Busquets and Pedri both shaded to the right so that Koundé could get farther forward, which in turn allowed Rafinha to curl inside on those runs that we'll get to in a second. I'll talk about the effects of all that later on, but the blanket statement I can use is that it's a reminder that even the best of Rafinha can only come when all the players that Xavi needs to prop up his system are available, which includes a healthy Pedri and Busquets. And there were a bunch of moments in that first half that reminded me of that fact. In the 21st minute, de Jong on a surging run forward that we would not have seen him do against Rayo Vallecano, who, by the way, got destroyed by Elche, that being the team that are at the bottom of the Liga table, 4-0 at the same time that the Barcelona game was going on. Oddly enough, making history by beating and losing to the two teams in the table with the largest point variance in history. So that's a great job by, I guess, all three teams involved for the week's results, but what are you going to do? That's football. But oh yeah, de Jong, we'll talk about him. He doesn't make that run or several of the runs into the box that he made in the second half if he's the lone pivot and doesn't feel like he has the proper coverage behind. And like what has been the case with all of those pivot / other controller next to a pivot performances that we see from de Jong sometimes in the same week. Like today, it's just food for thought at this point. I'm not sure what the answer is, and that's something we'll talk about on the podcast. Headline 2 is a perfect return. It cannot be understated how interesting it was to see Xavi's back line, which was with Andres Christensen back looking fully healthy, and comparing that with the Real Betis back line that looked like they had just met before the match. Xavi preferred for Balde, Christensen, Araujo, and Koundé back together again after way too long, and that unit, it made it a perfect return for Christensen as he managed his first goal in a Barcelona uniform. It starts from a corner kick, bounces around for a while before finding its way out to Rafinha. Rafinha delivers that left-footed cross in, and Christensen was left wide open right in the middle. Christensen also using the attention that Araujo gets to serve as his shadow. But what made Christensen's performance so impressive wasn't necessarily the goal. Again, that was a cherry on top. But having him return just made this back line look so much stronger. In 1v1 matchups, Christensen adds a support to Araujo that he just doesn't get from Alonso. And having Koundé on the right side instead of in the center with Araujo means that you're not really losing anything at that right back spot either. And it also, as I said, Real Betis kind of played into their hands because I already mentioned Koundé was able to push farther forward with Busquets and Pedri supporting. That also meant that Araujo was able to hand the ball off to Busquets or De Jong or Pedri in build-up and not have to be exposed in the ways that he was against Rayo Vallecano, because you did see in the early going that Real Betis was testing Barcelona a bit with the ball at the back and building out of the back, and they quickly broke through that within the first 5 to 8 minutes of the game. The issue with Barcelona, however, was the fact that they seemed to not be pressing as a unit very much today. And that's why this game got a bit wild in the middle there, because it seems like individuals were pressing more than the units. And were they marking zones? Were they marking people? Fortunately for Barcelona, I think both these teams were kind of screwy in that regard today. And things got even screwier with headline 3, which is flipped on its head by a red. Of course, this whole game can be summed up, at least from the 33rd, 34th minute on, by the second yellow that was handed out, that red card to Edgar Rodriguez. And it was a moment that changed the game, of course. You could see Joaquin, before he came in the game, going nuts about it, but it was the right call. It was clumsy by Edgar, coming down on Pedri's foot, and it's tough. You can get ejected without a red card caliber tackle. Instead, it's a yellow card, and it was a yellow card on the first tackle and the second tackle, hence the double yellow. It feels unfair because it's still the first half of a close game, but that was the letter of the law, and he should have been sent off. And as should be the case when you're at home in front of 90,000 people, that raid changed the entire complexion of the match, and in a good way. Barcelona was already focused on being vertical, almost to a fault when it was 11-11. Betis would have had their chances if the red doesn't come, but instead, only moments after the red, Barca score again. Immediately after a red, a team can be quite discombobulated, and that's exactly what Betis were. And good on Barcelona for exploiting that, and finally finding and picking out a weakness that the other team may have had, and we're showing you wide open. Because the very next attacking action by Barca, there was a lot more space on the wings for them, and a lot more space for Rafinha to come inside. Barcelona had a numerical overload on the right, Pedri and Gavi and Rafinha. Pedri pushed it to Gavi, who plays the nice through ball to Koundé, who was overlapping, as I've mentioned now 3 times, who does well to find Lewandowski, and he scores number 19 in the Liga by taking advantage of a back line with one less center back for at least the time being. It was gutsy for Pellegrini after that goal was scored not to immediately try to sub on, well, he didn't actually have any other center backs on the bench, but somebody, including the change that he made at halftime, to try to stop some of the bleeding, but he didn't do that. He waited till half, which, again, with the third goal, that meant that it was a little bit too late. Once it was 3-0, it really did feel like in the second half like that game was over. And that third goal was scored just minutes after the second one. It's brilliant from Lewandowski on the sideline. He gets through 2, Busquets in with too much time and space to pick out a pass, and Rafinha gets rewarded for his curling run in behind the back line. A run that I wish we saw Barca connect a bit more on. It was almost deemed offside, but after a long VAR check, they give the goal, and that means Rafinha got both a goal and an assist in the game and winds up getting both his goals and assist contributions to the double-digit marks in the Liga this season. Not too shabby, again, I'm not saying this facetiously, but not too shabby for a player that has not played his best to still have double-digit goal and assist contributions. That's, again, pretty good for how poorly his first season at the Camp Nou has been. Headline 4 is a little shine for Joaquin and Ansu, 2 different ends of the age spectrum. We'll get to the extremes of that with our 5th headline, of course. But in the case of Joaquin first, he was able to enter the game with, again, the game probably already over, but his team was able to find some footing there to start the second half, finally settling into a 4-3-2 to defend and tried to play as narrow as possible, even forcing a 53rd minute save by Ter Stegen, which he had to do well on, or else that game could have been a bit interesting. 3-1, at that point it would have been 10 men against 11, so who knows what would have happened with Real Betis getting a goal and maybe taking back a little momentum, but as has been the case with the Liga this season, Ter Stegen said absolutely not, and they moved on, as the game again at that moment felt completely over. So the subs entering the game, again, the breath kind of being taken out of the game as well. And it was Joaquin who arrived from the Betis bench at the ripe old age of 41 and deserved the applause he got at the Camp Nou. I was just dipping my toe in the Liga back in 2000 when he made his debut, and boy, yeah, that does make me feel old. I saw a poll on Twitter about were you closer in age to Joaquin and Lamine Yamal. Of course, I'm quite a bit closer to Joaquin, yet it still felt like, man, this guy has been around a while. That means that I've been around at the same time too. But again, I was still a young player while Joaquin was already an adult enough to make a first team debut. So that tells you that, yeah, he's even got a few years on me. He's been a legend in the Liga, and it's a shame that he went to Valencia at all. When Ronald Koeman was in charge, I covered the fact that Joaquin and Ronald Koeman were as much of water and oil as you could possibly get, and that did not do anything good for either of those two men's career in the time that they overlapped and spent together. So good that Joaquin found his way after a trip at Malaga back to Betis, where he made 2 different sets of 200-plus appearances for Betis to start and end his career. So pretty storybook there for him. And Joaquin, I feel like he'll still be around the game for a while, but this certainly, I hope it's not the way he goes out, going off with that injury, putting Real Betis down to 9 men for the remainder of that game. Fortunately for Barcelona, that meant that they were able to sub some guys out. I mean, Pedri also got to come out in the 73rd minute alongside Rafinha, but this time around didn't have to feel like he was getting yanked too early, so he makes way with the applause to Dembele, who gets an ovation for his return as well. So again, a lot of just good vibes at the Camp Nou on the day. But that also meant that Ansu Fati, who came on as a sub earlier, even more so against 9 men when Joaquin left injured, he got to do a little bit of that, showcasing what he can do in space and when he's feeling confident. And it was much, much more space than he usually does have. And so I'm glad that we were able to see just a literal glimmer of hope from Ansu Fati. Of course, on that fourth goal too, being the architect of it, Ansu Fati, who actually made his debut against Real Betis, gets that goal, who got that goal way back as a 16-year-old in 2019. Instead, he doesn't get another goal. He picks up a not actually counted assist, but yeah, for Kool-Aid, we'll give him a little bit of an assist there on the old goal from Guido. He was lively in that game, and it was great to see. Is it possibly something to build on? I'm not so sure about that, but at least in that moment, in the moments for Real Betis in a 4-0 win, it was real positive signs for Ansu Fati. And headline 5 is teenage history. The substitute that, of course, has to get all the shine. The one that we have to talk about is the one that makes history, and that's Lamine Yamal, coming on in the last 10 minutes or so to close out that game. And as I mentioned last week, I'll give you the history lesson again here. He's the youngest player ever to debut for Barca's first team, beating the record of Armand Martinez Sagi, who was 15 years and 11 months when he debuted in 1922. 101 years that record stood. Again, 1922 is prior to La Liga being created, as La Liga was started in 1929. So, of course, that goes without saying that Lamine Yamal is not only Barcelona's youngest debut ever in their first team history, of course, in an official match because it predated La Liga. They had the Catalan Cup or the Catalan National Championship at the time. But obviously in La Liga, it is Barcelona's youngest debut as well. Beating out, well, again, Paulinho Alcantara was before that, 1913, but as well as Vicente Martinez, also predating La Liga, and Ansu Fati. Ansu Fati was the prior holder of that record of the youngest debut in the Liga for any Barcelona player. And if Lamine Yamal does somehow get a goal, in however many games he gets still called up to the first team, because I'm not sure if he's going to be going back down now or then, because Juvenal just were crowned champions with the win today. So I'm not sure if Lamine Yamal even needs to go back to the U19 level. And since he's already here, there's no reason for him to incorporate into Barca Athletic either. So I could see Xavi continuing to call him up, throwing him on a little bit more, and seeing if they can make a little more history. Because it almost happened in this game. It was absolutely perfect timing to bring him on against a 9-man Betis team at home in front of 90,000 people who were going to support him, who were in a good mood, and thankfully the kid didn't disappoint. He almost got a goal, of course, a slip from the Betis defender, and he was in on goal. And Rui Silva comes out to meet him, and Lewandowski wanted the ball squared to him. And I bet he kind of said, "Welcome to the first team, kid, but also, I am Robert Lewandowski. Don't you forget my name." And it was good to see that Lamine Yamal and whatever was said in that moment didn't deter him too much, because he almost got an assist as well, finding Dembele, who was onside. That ball over the top, and Dembele looking to square to Lewandowski as well. Maybe Lewandowski got in Dembele's ear as well. But either way, Lewandowski did get his 19th goal. Lamine Yamal got his debut. Barcelona got a 4-0 win at home. And they, most importantly, I didn't even mention it, got 3 points. They stay 11 points atop of the table with very few games remaining on the schedule. Just about a month left of the Liga season. So it'll be an exciting one down the stretch. I hope you'll stay with me here, where Barcelona should, and I say should, be lifting the Liga trophy before too long. So again, I hope you're with me on that journey. And until then, as always, Forza Barca. The scoreline of 4-2 is quite deceiving for what today meant for Kool-Aids. Barcelona defeat Espanyol 4-2. I'm not going to waste any time. If you're here, you know it's time to celebrate Barcelona's time as champions. I guess before that, we do have to talk about the match just for a second. So let's do it. Barcelona's 4-2 win over Espanyol. These are the 5 headlines. Headline 1 is Campeones. Yeah, I'm going to start at the end here, but that's the big deal. That's a thing that you shouldn't take for granted, that doesn't happen all the time. And I can tell you, as someone who's been doing this week in and week out and day out, that these titles aren't guaranteed. It may feel like it, but it's been 4 years since the last one. This is Barcelona's 27th in their history, which, yes, is a big deal, but that dates back to their first Liga title in the first year of the Liga in 1929. That was a long time ago. That was the first iteration of the competition, but it was 93 years ago. 27 in 93 years, meaning 27 of 92 championships. Not too bad. That's actually pretty good. They've won 29% of all titles in the league history, but again, waiting the last 4 years feels like an absolute lifetime. And there is some irony in this being Barcelona's first
title since Lionel Messi left, because it's the same day that Juan Laporta is, of course, answering questions about Lionel Messi's return. Who would have thought? And people are certainly going to poke holes in this league title. It was luck. There was a combination of things. Of course, Barcelona's defense being, we know, having seen him in Europe, better in the Liga than they truly are if they were to look in the mirror. But it doesn't matter. There were 11 1-0 wins, whether it was the youthfulness of Pedri and Gavi and Balde, or the old age of Busquets, and a squad that never really either felt healthy or never looked right or never just seemed like it was fully put together. Doesn't matter. None of that matters. I can tell you that I've done it. When you go back and you look at what was wrong with that year, or this champion in this year, and this champion in that year, again, it doesn't matter. All you will remember is Campeones. And if Barcelona go and do it again next year, we'll remember the exact same thing. It was 2 years in a row if that winds up being the case, and that's all you can say about that. And I don't need to tell you, if you're a Culé, it's wonderful to do this against Espanyol, a local rival. I did have that whole history about the rivalry, so yeah, it does mean something. It matters to do it against Espanyol. The Parakeets have now gone 26 derbies in a row without a win against Barcelona in the Liga, the worst winless run against any opponent in their top flight history, and the worst winless streak by any team in any regional derby in the competition. So that's the Basque Country, Andalusia, even the Madrid region. So for Barcelona to have that kind of dominance over not even little brothers, but I mean baby brothers, I don't know what you want to call it, and they've been here since the very first league as well, 1929. There is a good chance historic that Espanyol, now going down for their sixth time likely, would bounce back up if they are indeed relegated. But to get 3 points over Espanyol, they get 0, and that means they are a big step closer to relegation this season. Well, that's just the icing on the cake. Headline 2 is setting up and finishing with an ugly tone. Again, I'm going to start at the end and go back to the beginning. At the end of it all, when Barcelona was celebrating on the field, of course, what I think is going to be very memorable in all the wrong ways is the Espanyol fans coming out of the stands and rushing the field, forcing the Barcelona players to retreat back into their own locker room. I mean, I think some kind of fine is definitely going to be coming down to them. I don't know if it's going to be a point deduction, especially if they're in a Segunda division. I would think that Liga wouldn't give them a point reduction at this point in this year to go against them, to relegate them fully. I can see the disciplinary action on this taking time. That means we wouldn't get a ruling until like July, August, again, which might matter for them if they're in the Segunda division, which makes it obviously harder for them to come up next year. But justice will be coming for Espanyol in ways that those supporters probably are not going to like, and certainly didn't get the job done or whatever they had planned. And for Barcelona, while it feels like, yeah, their celebrations were cut short and it's always going to be remembered for the day because you never know what any of those crazies are thinking, still, they celebrate in the locker room. They will continue to celebrate, and wait till you see that tour bus tomorrow. I think in the city of Barcelona, there will be enough love for those wearing Blaugrana. And to go all the way back to the beginning, it wasn't just the fans at the end. This game felt from the very start that win or lose, it was going to be pretty ugly. And it wasn't just Espanyol. Koundé picked up an early yellow. That was the bad news. But the good news is, around the 18th minute or so, he very well could have got a second yellow. And boo on you, Martin Braithwaite. I used to stand up for that guy sometimes. He seemed like a class act. But for him to try to get that second yellow in the 18th minute against Koundé, I mean, I feel like Barcelona going down to 10 was the only option that Espanyol had to try to win that game. And I guess that was Braithwaite's idea. But Koundé, good job on him to pull out of that tackle. But it wasn't just him either. Busquets was fouled with a little bit extra. Both of those incidents happening in the first 5 minutes. There was a 39th minute yellow for Gavi for being Gavi. And to be positive about how ugly the game was, though, this is where I'll talk about De Jong for just a second. He was phenomenal again in this contest, but this season more than any others. I'm not to say that he is fully arrived, that he, like Araujo said in postgame, that he's the best midfielder in the world. But I will say that De Jong had more, I would say 4 or 5 star out of 5 star games this season, this being another one. And yeah, you can make the argument that he did it against a side that's likely going to get relegated, or the games that he showed up in weren't the biggest opponents other than that one Villarreal match when Villarreal were doing well back there in the fall. But I really do think that De Jong has had more really good performances this season than ones where he's been pedestrian and gone missing like in previous years. So I know it feels like, yeah, he's been around too long, he's not going to improve. It does feel like, even though I still don't know where he fits, what it all means for next year with Busquets leaving, so everything could change. But if he can take as many of the good performances as he had this year and carry that into next season, give him some confidence for wherever Xavi needs to put him, because again, that is the silver lining of Busquets leaving. Once a guy is gone and you've got to figure out what your plan B is, that means that De Jong, I think, is going to have more of a fortified position, more of a fortified role next season than he's ever had in his Blaugrana career. Particularly this match, though, I think what De Jong really did well with was the game was physical, but it was also up and down, and yet Barcelona still had 71% of the possession, and that did allow De Jong to express himself. So it kind of checked all the boxes for what needs to happen for a good De Jong performance, or an excellent De Jong performance. That's a lot of control, but still up and down, room to move, and even when it gets a bit physical, I think he's more ready for that at this point in his career, and it was just an all-around great performance from De Jong. Headline 3 is Barca's third golden boy. I say this tongue-in-cheek. Of course, I'm going to be talking about Alejandro Balde in a second because we have to talk about the goals. I praised De Jong for a while there. He and Busquets and Gavi and Pedri, I know he had that shot that went wide, but they were the backbone to building all this up. Usually is the case when Barcelona on the front foot and dominating an opponent. That means their midfield very much outclassed the opposition. That happened again today. But it wasn't them who necessarily put the ball in the back of the net. In that 3-2-5, somebody along the front five is likely going to create it, and somebody along that front five is likely going to score it. Well, that does change a bit later with De Jong on an assist, but we'll get there in a second. For the first goal, though, let's talk about it. It was Lewandowski's goal. Balde delivers an important final ball. 20 league goals now from Lewandowski. It was Araujo's diagonal ball, and it was a relegation opponent, so I do get to go back to praising Araujo's ever-improving skills on the ball. So he gives that big diagonal long ball ahead to Balde. Gavi also tucked in a bit deeper. That allowed Balde to get into a 1v1 situation by pulling his man so far deeper, that being Gavi's man, that Balde again had that 1v1 on the wing. Then he took Oscar Gil to school, and there was no doubt. Perfect pinpoint pass to Lewandowski, who got in a dangerous area, put the ball in the back of the net. Let's jump ahead to the second goal of the game, that being Balde's goal, his first in the Liga, and finally an assist for Pedri. I think the Balde goal, his first, that's important. Finally an assist for Pedri, that's pretty incredible. We'll talk more about that on the podcast, break down some of those numbers. But Rafinha on this one actually starts the move again, like he's done so many times now since he entered the starting lineup. And then he sets a pick for Pedri as the number 8 dribbles to the goal line. Not much space, but both he and Balde find the space necessary for Balde to fight his way to the back post and keep his balance on the left-footed finish. Actually a pretty good finish from Balde, all things considered, of all the things that he had to do with that ball in the air. Also timing that run for when Pedri would finally be able to get it out of his feet. Alejandro Balde has now both scored and assisted in the same game for Barcelona for the first time in all competitions for him. That's 48 games, becoming the youngest player to score and assist in a derby against Espanyol in the Liga in the 21st century, 19 years, 208 days. And oddly enough, I talked about some of the history between Barcelona and Espanyol. Balde is the only member of the first team that spent time in the Espanyol Academy. So I don't know what that says about Balde. He certainly celebrated the goal as if he wasn't saying thank you Espanyol for the time I had with you when I was younger than the age of 11 when he came to Barcelona. But anyway, for Balde, big day for him. And for Pedri, here's the stat. We'll talk more about it on the pod as I said. It took 40 key passes for Pedri to finally record an assist. That is bonkers. I don't know if there's a way for me to look up the longest key passes streak between assists, but certainly Pedri's has got to be making some kind of record with the advanced metrics and all that, but maybe someone will help me out. You could do that in the comments below. And the title to this about Balde being Barcelona's third golden boy, it's really hard to say that that's going to happen because he is a left back, so while he will certainly be named to the short list, I don't know how short that list is going to get with him still on it, but as a left back, I can't imagine he's possibly going to win that award, but I am saying that he should be in the conversation, and right now, there's no argument. He's the best 19-year-old left back in world football. There are some others that are around the age that do have a high profile and are very good, but he is farther along than anybody else at this age. I'm not saying he's the best young left back or anything like that, but I'm saying that 19 and under, Alejandro Balde is the guy right now, and certainly Culés know what he needs to work on, but Culés also know and should know what they have in this player. Headline 4 is the Rafinha debate. I actually want to keep this topic just a little bit shorter because after second thought, thinking about this match, I don't think this is that big of a deal or should be really talked about after this. Rafinha had a decent match against another poor side, sure, but again, I don't want to keep going through every game for all of these players, for the Marcos Alonsos and Rafinhas and Eric Garcias, and say, okay, that match is completely discarded because of the opposition. That you can only play well and only be considered to a player who played well and was worth your value if you did it in Europe, if you did it against opponent XYZ. And if you fail to do it in those matches, then it takes 10 against inferior opponents to feel like you've made up for that one mistake of a match or that one time you went missing against superior competition. But as far as the Rafinha debate, the reason we're actually talking about it is because on the third goal, Lewandowski gets his brace, but Rafinha got the assist. 34% of the goals scored by Barcelona, by the way, this year in the Liga were scored by Lewandowski. Rafinha, though, off to the races with a simple leading pass. And I'm immediately going to contradict myself, and I am going to say this goal, way too easy. No offense to De Jong, who led that leading pass for Rafinha, or the cross into Lewandowski, which both Espanyol defenders kind of went to the near post. Lewandowski went to the far post, timed it perfectly, smacks it home for the second goal of the game. But Espanyol, they put a few numbers forward, but when they turned it over to Busquets, it was a 5v4 with Espanyol having the advantage. Then that leading pass for Rafinha from De Jong made it 3v2. And again, neither center back picks up Lewandowski. An easy goal for Barcelona. And again, that third goal, I say, Espanyol, boo on you, do better. And Barcelona, I'm glad you took advantage of a team that was ready to be ripped apart at that point in the game. But the Rafinha debate, as far as having a referendum now at this point in the season, who knows if he stays or comes. I've had my opinion on what I think should happen and what I think might happen. But whether or not he should have been brought in at all for the price tag he was, it's still polarizing. Because Dembélé was on the sideline, injured, missed the time that Kool-Aid knew that he would miss. And the counter-argument to not bringing Rafinha in, obviously, is that when Dembélé was surely going to go down when he would, who possibly would have played right wing in his absence? Would it have been Ferran Torres? And would have Ferran Torres come close to the goal contributions that Rafinha had? I'm not really so sure about that in any way. And from the finance perspective, as someone who could cause about that stuff all the time, it was way too much, of course. Barcelona spent way too much for an insurance policy for Dembélé, for a backup for the right wing. But again, if you look at it that they went out and bought Rafinha because of the notion that at some point when Dembélé goes down, Xavi wouldn't have a left winger or a right winger that he could trust for a large part of the season, which meant all of this in the last few months without Rafinha. I don't know how many of those La Liga results actually do lead to wins. I think there's a lot of drop points there. And instead of winning the league title here against Espanyol, it might have come down to the final match day. I still think, with or without Rafinha, that Barcelona possibly get over the line. But looking back at those 1-0s, sure, what if there was a It's a Wonderful Life situation with Rafinha, and you have to go through revisionist history about what if he wasn't around, and what if it was Ferran Torres who started on the right wing there, what if Sergio Roberto got a bunch of starts there, whatever you want to say. Maybe it was Petty who was pushed forward, and then Kessie got a few more starts in a 4-3-3, or you get the point. They would have had to problem solve and figure it out if Rafinha wasn't around and had never been bought. But yeah, it's polarizing. Let me know in the comments if you think it made sense for Rafinha, or more importantly, if you thought Barcelona would have won La Liga without him. And headline 5 is pile on. Ter Stegen should be shouted out quite quickly here. He had a few big saves in this game. The one before halftime on Braithwaite when Barcelona had a 2.40 XG, Espanyol an 0.67 because of that one move. Ter Stegen again, another save in the 70th minute. Christensen letting him down. And then Barcelona were able to pile on. You felt like that Koundé goal, him getting his first goal as well, felt like that was the end. That was the victory lap. And it probably would have been helpful for everybody in the stadium, including Barcelona, including the Espanyol supporters, if the referee had just blown his whistle at that point. But Espanyol thought it was offside. It wasn't. De Jong delivered it to Koundé's head on a platter, and he wonderfully flicked it in under the keeper. Javi Puado, a midfielder, got brought in to guard the run in behind from Koundé and wasn't up to the task on it. And at that moment, too, I was like, well, Espanyol, they are going to have some talent, I think, that's going to be picked off in the offseason. Josuelo, Sergi Darder, Cesar Montes, Nico Melamed, Javier Prado, not much else, but I think you might see at least that fivesome be playing somewhere else around the Liga or the EPL or Bundesliga, wherever, one of the big leagues. I think they'll still be in the top flight for those 5. I can't say much more for anybody else for Espanyol if they go down. And then I don't really think we need to talk about the 2 consolation goals that Espanyol got, as I mentioned. One from Puado, one from Josuelo. Didn't really matter, but it was one of those things, if people want to talk about it, maybe we'll highlight it on the podcast for a second, that, of course, Xavi puts in his subs. Marcos Alonso, Jordi Alba comes on, and Araujo goes off, I think more importantly, more than anything else, and the defense just completely falls apart. As I said, 2 consolation goals that, at that point, the game was over. I think even Koundé and Christensen, you could see, they had an eye on the Siniera kits that their teammates were wearing on the sideline, and they were ready to celebrate the league title. So yeah, 2 goals get in past Ter Stegen, and a lot of people get to count those 2 goals and kind of disparaging whatever Barcelona's final goals conceded number winds up being. You know, I don't want to put an asterisk next to those 2 goals because people put an asterisk next to all the ones that weren't scored, where it's opportunistic and just bad luck for the opposition that they didn't score it. So yeah, sure, I guess those are 2 of a bit of an equalizer, but yeah, I'm not concerned with them at all because, to wrap it all up, Barcelona, a reminder, are campeones. At this point, if you're watching on YouTube, I always do hint it. There's a certain guest I like to talk tactics about. He makes some pretty good videos. So I'm hoping to get him on the podcast on Tuesday like I've had before. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Xavi, how he kind of changed Barcelona and turned them into the champions they are. We're going to go for a little bit of victory lap on some of the things that him and I had called a few months ago and have gotten right and vindicated, certainly, by this Liga title. The first one for Barcelona since 2019. And finally, shouts to you and thank you. If you've been with me since 2019 and you've been waiting this time for me to say Campeones of La Liga, well, it's been quite some time. Thank you for being with me this entire time of this journey. I've got a bunch planned, not only for the off season, but for next season already. I'm getting those things together and I'm hoping that you're with me. So subscribe if you're not already. Like this video, share it, and let me know. Where do you want to see my content that you don't see it? Is it Reddit? Is it other places on the internet that you're not finding it? This is my little PSA at the end, especially during the summertime. I look at this kind of stuff. I evaluate this stuff. That's why it took a few months to even begin the TikTok back in January. I had taken a few months, thought about that stuff. And as you know, there's not some kind of huge The Barcelona podcast empire. There are a ton of people you know from the podcast who do help me out behind the scenes. But when it comes to the Barcelona podcast, you're looking at them, so it is a big help. Any feedback, positive feedback, I say it, let me say it again, positive feedback that people have to give or suggestions, I'm always all ears. So yeah, leave it down in the comments below. Let's talk about it because I want to look at some things in the offseason and make this channel better than ever for the next time when Barcelona are campeones, not only of Spain, but of Europe as well. And we can dream that might be in the near future, who knows. As always, until next time, Forza Barça. In the case that you do need a thank you for getting all the way through this, well, thank you for getting all the way through it. Or maybe you just fell asleep and on the transition into your next auto-played video. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the adventure and I hope to see you soon. And as always, Forza Barça.